Chapter 141, The Beginning. Actually, within the current Demon Slayer Corps, while there were certainly high-ranking people who supported and valued Tanjiro, many others didn't acknowledge him. It was because of a simple reason: Tanjiro had violated the rules of the Demon Slayer Corps. As a Demon Slayer of the Demon Slayer Corps, Tanjiro not only sheltered a demon, who was considered their enemy, but also kept this demon by his side. Yes, the wooden box that he carried around so carefully actually contained a demon. As a result, he faced hostility from many Hashira within the Demon Slayer Corps. Only the Water Hashira and the Insect Hashira could be considered to stand by his side, choosing to support him. As for Kyujiro, the Flame Hashira, although he did not show hostility toward Tanjiro because the master acknowledged his situation, it was still a bit early to say that he had fully accepted Tanjiro and chosen to support him. Kyujiro's current attitude toward Tanjiro could be described as one of temporary observation, as evidenced by when he told Tanjiro that he wanted to observe him. Tanjiro was aware of this, which was why a hint of gloom appeared on his face. Fortunately, he recovered from this gloom very quickly. "I believe in Nezuko," Tanjiro declared firmly, placing a hand on the wooden box beside him as he looked at Kyujiro. "She will surely gain Mr. Rengoku's approval." Kyujiro nodded, maintaining a smile. "Naturally, I hope so too." Hearing that response, Tanjiro smiled. Generally speaking, Kyujiro was actually quite benevolent toward Tanjiro. He was not like some of the Hashira who blatantly acted hostile toward Tanjiro for sheltering a demon. Perhaps realizing this, Tanjiro began to relax his expression. Are you also a member of the Corps?" Tanjiro finally shifted his attention to Rizel. This mysterious young man, who looked only 1 or 2 years older than him, seemed to have a good relationship with the Flame Hashira, but he was not wearing the uniform of the Demon Slayer Corps, leaving him somewhat uncertain about this young man's identity. Tanjiro's question was soon answered by Kyujiro. "This bento boy is going to be my Suguko," Kyujiro declared loudly. "Ah, I see, so this big brother is Mr. Rengoku's successor." Tanjiro thought, finally understood. The term, Suguko, didn't refer to an adopted child but rather to the apprentice and successor of Hashira. They were usually direct subordinates of Hashira, with lower rank but considerable status and influence within the Demon Slayer Corps. They were often regarded as proxies for the Hashira. When Mr. Rengoku said this big brother is his Suguko, does that mean he is Mr. Rengoku's apprentice? So, he is also a user of flame breathing. Tanjiro pondered inwardly. Miss Shinobu mentioned that only someone like Mr. Rengoku who understands flame breathing as a flame Hashira might know something about the technique I used against the lower 5 last time. Does Mr. Rengoku's Suguko also know something about it? With those thoughts in mind, Tanjiro couldn't help but want to know. But before he could ask, Rizel spoke first. "No," Rizel denied it briefly. What do you mean by no?" Tanjiro was taken aback. "I am not Suguko of the Flame Hashira." Rizel glanced at Kyujiro, who was smiling beside him, then turned his head to Tanjiro. "We just met on this train, and before this, we were strangers and had no idea of each other's existence." Tanjiro's eyes widened as he turned to Kyujiro, surprised. Is that true, Mr. Rengoku?" "Don't worry about these minor details," Kyujiro said confidently and firmly. "This bento boy will be my Suguko. This is my decision." Upon hearing that adamant answer, Tanjiro couldn't help but be dumbfounded, while Zenitsu, who was currently engaged in a fierce battle with Inosuke, couldn't help but chime in. "Doesn't that mean you haven't got his consent yet?" Zenitsu's words summarized the situation quite accurately. In any case, Rizel was completely unaware of the matter of being a Suguko from start to finish and had no plans to become Kyujiro's apprentice or successor. "Since you guys just met on this train, doesn't that mean this big brother here is actually an outsider?" Zenitsu, being quite sharp, grasped the crucial point. ... Everyone instantly fell silent. "Are you serious? Involving ordinary people in our mission isn't allowed, right? It could be dangerous." Although timid, Zenitsu was still kind-hearted. Upon realizing that Rizel was just a bystander, he immediately stood up in a panic. "Are you seriously discussing our mission and the Mugen Train incident so openly in front of an outsider? Aren't you afraid of causing chaos?" Zenitsu sure liked to make a fuss, looking like he hadn't seen much of the world. "It's okay, you guys don't have to worry about me." Without even setting down his bento box, Rizel spoke calmly to Tanjiro and Zenitsu. "Even though I'm not part of the Demon Slayer Corps and indeed just a bystander, don't be fooled by appearances. I do have some understanding of your circumstances. Besides, I can protect myself." Upon hearing that, Zenitsu was speechless and didn't know what to say. Tanjiro also fell into silence, gazing at Rizel, lost in thought. It was Inosuke, who had been wild and erratic just moments ago, now leaning against the window, casually chimed in. "He's telling the truth, you know. I can sense it. He is strong, probably even stronger than the flame Hashira next to him." "Oh," Kyujiro raised an eyebrow. Oddly enough, Inosuke's nonsensical remark gained Tanjiro's approval. "Inosuke is right." Tanjiro nodded earnestly. "Big Brother's words just now didn't carry the scent of lies, and I can detect an incredible scent emanating from him. It's the kind of scent that only a swordsman honed through 1,000 trials would have." Kyujiro raised his eyebrow again. "Seriously? You guys serious?" Zenitsu was bewildered by all this, but shortly afterward, he began to ponder as he gazed at Rizel. "Now that I think about it, I can hear some strange sounds from him, kinda spooky." Kyujiro crossed his arms, nodding thoughtfully. Only Rizel, upon hearing the words of the three youths, spoke with genuine surprise. "Your abilities are indeed quite special. If someone else were to hear the words of Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke here, they would surely find it nonsense." However, Rizel knew that the words of these three had reasons behind them. Whether it was Tanjiro, Inosuke, or even Zenitsu, each of them possessed an exceptionally sensitive and sharp sense. Tanjiro had a sharp sense of smell. Inosuke had an incredibly sensitive sense of touch. Zenitsu had a heightened sense of hearing. These three youths could each perceive information and clues through smell, hearing, and skin sensations that ordinary people couldn't confirm, stronger even than some famously sensitive animals. Precisely because of this, these three became this world's main characters, forming a group not only because they were like-minded, but also because they were equally special. As Rizel was about to say something else, someone walked into the carriage. "Please show your tickets." A train conductor dressed in a train staff uniform spoke weakly and without strength. Everyone in the carriage then noticed the conductor of the train approaching, seeming a bit lackluster, not only speaking sluggishly but also with a weary expression on his face. "Please show your tickets." Undoubtedly, this conductor was here to check passenger tickets. "Yosh, let's get the tickets checked first," Kyujiro said to everyone. "We'll deal with the rest later." "Yes." Agreeing, the three youths nodded. One by one, the passengers presented their tickets, handing them over to be hole-punched by the conductor. Seeing this scene, Rizel's eyes flickered. As someone familiar with the original work, he knew that this was not a good idea. Neither Kyujiro nor the three main characters knew that the tickets for the Mugen train had been tampered with by a hidden demon on board, with demon blood mixed into the ink on the tickets. Once the conductor hole-punched the tickets, the hidden demon would use the blood on the tickets to cast an illusion, hypnotizing all the passengers holding tickets. For this reason, this ticket checking was actually dangerous. Nevertheless, Rizel had no intention of stopping it. Because he knew not only the tickets but the entire train had been tampered with by the demon. If the members of the Demon Slayer Corps were not hypnotized but instead took action immediately, it was very likely to provoke an extreme reaction from the hidden demon, leading the demon to attack the entire train directly. Since there were still 200 passengers on this train, if something unexpected happened, it would definitely be a big trouble. In that case, it was better to take matters into his own hands while everyone was hypnotized and asleep so he could defeat the demon without any nuisance. "Please show your ticket." Before long, the conductor had now approached Rizel, asking him to show his ticket. Rizel calmly took out his ticket and handed it to the conductor, allowing him to hole-punch it. He wasn't afraid of being hypnotized. Being completely immune to mental interference from self-redemption and possessing the highest rank development ability of abnormal resistance from Endless, he was impossible to hypnotize. Unfortunately, as he thought like that, Rizel forgot one thing. Within the skill effects of self-redemption, there was an effect that said, can accept and enhance the effects of friendly buffs on oneself. In other words, If the hypnosis had no negative effects on him but instead benefited him, he would still be affected, and it would also be enhanced. Ding! Ling! In this calm, Tanjiro's Hanafuda earrings adorned with sun symbols gently swayed, emitting a barely perceptible pleasant tinkling sound. Chapter 142, Sun Breathing. Ding! Ling! Suddenly, the sound of wind chimes could be heard. Somewhat distant, yet also strangely close. Ding! Ling! Asterisk ding! Ling! The rhythmic tinkling of the wind chimes seemed to stir and call out to Riesel. It sounded pleasant and captivating. In a daze, Riesel followed the sound of the wind chimes, slowly walking in a particular direction. Wait a sec, where the hell is this? As Riesel snapped back to reality, his mind emerging from the haze, he suddenly realized he was in an utterly unfamiliar place. Mountaintop. Indeed, Riesel found himself atop a mountain. It was a seemingly lofty peak, almost touching the sky, bathed entirely in the sunlight, making the sun appear larger than it actually was. How did I end up here? Riesel frowned. Wasn't he on the Mugen train just a moment ago? 1 second he was getting his ticket checked by the conductor, and the next moment he was in a place like this. Don't tell me I get hypnotized. Is this inside a dream? Realizing what had happened, Riesel felt a twinge of amazement. He, with the highest rank of abnormal resistance development ability and immunity to mental interference from self-redemption, got hypnotized by a demon. He couldn't believe it, yet, the undeniable reality before him told him that whether he believed it or not, he had indeed entered a dream. The evidence was clear. Despite being on the mountaintop with strong winds and intense sunlight, he couldn't feel the breeze brushing against his body, nor could he sense the warmth of the sun. Fascinating. Confirming this, Riesel murmured to himself. After observing his surroundings for a moment, Riesel quickly reached out his hand and grabbed his own neck, preparing to snap it. This was the most effective way to break free from the demon's dream. Killing oneself in the dream would lead to waking up. However, just as Riesel was about to snap his own neck, a deep voice suddenly reached his ears. Sun breathing consists of 13 sword forms. When this unexpected voice echoed in his ears, Riesel's movement to snap his neck halted. It was only then that he noticed he wasn't alone on this mountaintop. Seemingly out of nowhere, a figure of a man appeared not far from him, facing away, exuding a mysterious aura. He had black hair tied up in a high ponytail with red edges, dressed in a red houri, holding a sword in hand, and standing against the backdrop of the sun in the sky. Ding! Ling! The familiar chimes sounded again, but this time it came from the earrings of the mysterious man, no, mysterious swordsman. On the swordsman's ears were a pair of Hanafuda earrings with sun symbols. When one looked carefully, these earrings were undoubtedly identical to the ones Tanjiro wore on his ears. Riesel paused his words, staring at the swordsman standing before him, facing the sun, unable to move. Ha! In the next moment, the swordsman began to breathe in and out without any apparent reason. Taking in large amounts of air, the swordsman maintained his position with his back to Riesel and began demonstrating a strange breathing technique right in front of him. Clearly, this breathing resembled Kyujiro's flame breathing in some ways, yet it was entirely different. Kyujiro's breathing was powerful, with each exhale bringing a faint sensation of heat as if breathing out flames rather than air. While the breathing of this swordsman indeed felt similar to Kyujiro's flame breathing, powerful and emitting a slight heat like flames, compared to his flame breathing, this swordsman's breath not only carried the burning and destructive power of flames but also a sense of endless energy. As the swordsman breathed toward the sun, the mysterious aura emanating from him intensified, as if he were no longer human but had transformed into a spirit. Like a spirit, the unknown swordsman began to dance. Sun breathing. First form, dance. With a faint whisper, the swordsman released a slash forward. Swish. Asterisk. It was an arcing slash. His slash was swift, appearing like a fleeting ray of sunlight. As it cut through the air, flames suddenly ignited, forming the trajectory of a sun, slicing through the void and the atmosphere. Sun breathing. Second form, clear blue sky. The swordsman smoothly transitioned into the next attack, his sword turning naturally. Leaping high into the air, he twisted his body and brought down the flaming sword from above, carving another sun trajectory. As it slashed onto the ground, the flames transformed into a flaming wheel, spreading out in all directions. Wherever the flaming wheel passed, everything was scorched by the flames, leaving behind charred marks and terrifying sword scars that seemed capable of cleaving the entire mountaintop, displaying astonishing power. In this manner, the swordsman continued to dance, repeatedly showcasing his swordsmanship. Raging sun, fake rainbow, fire wheel, burning bones, summer sun, sunflower thrust, solar heat haze, setting sun transformation, beneficent radiance, sun halo dragon head dance, flame dance. Each dance represented a sword form. Each slash represented a sword technique. The swordsman repeatedly practiced these 12 sword forms, facing the sun, with his back to Riesel, enveloped in flames, dancing like a flame spirit. No, he was not a flame spirit, but a sun spirit. Riesel began to feel a sense of illusion, as if this swordsman had flown out from the rising sun he faced, even though flames were rolling around his body, but wherever his sword passed, it seemed capable of cutting through the air, the earth, everything, burning all existence. Yet strangely, it didn't evoke fear but rather a marvelous sense of closeness to nature and a mysterious captivated feeling. It wasn't flames that destroyed everything, but a radiant flame that expelled every evil. It wasn't just high temperatures that evaporated matter, but a holy light that purified vile darkness. Hoo! Ha! As the swordsman danced amidst the billowing flames, he continuously unleashed sharp and powerful swordsmanship while breathing rhythmically. Although the breaths were not very pronounced, they echoed distinctly in Riesel's ears, allowing him to directly feel the intricacies of this breathing. Watching all this, feeling all this, unknowingly, Riesel slowly released his hand from his neck. He immersed himself in the swordsman's sword dance. He was deeply attracted by the swordsmanship practiced by the swordsman, unable to look away, unable to remember anything else. Every slash, every sword form wielded by the swordsman, resembling the sun spirit, deeply imprinted in Riesel's mind, imprinted deep in his heart, making him unable to forget no matter how hard he tried. Gradually, even Riesel was drawn by the wondrous breathing sound echoing in his ears, unconsciously mimicking it. Hoo! Ha! Just as he had imitated Kyujiro's breathing on the train, Riesel began to mimic the swordsman's breathing. Regardless of frequency, number of times, amplitude, timing, quantity, or rhythm, Riesel unintentionally drew closer and closer to the swordsman. Ba-dump, ba-dump, asterisk. Eventually, the beating of his heart began to accelerate, while the flow of his blood also quickened. His lungs expanded continuously, allowing Riesel to inhale larger and fiercer air. Breathing in such large quantities of air, under normal circumstances, he might have worried about oxygen toxicity, but at this moment, he abandoned all thoughts and focused wholeheartedly on following the swordsman's breathing, immersing himself in the other's sword dance, almost unable to control himself. In this state, Riesel failed to notice that as his breathing changed, the power surging from within him became stronger and more intense. It was a power far beyond what he had experienced while imitating Kyujiro's flame breathing. A breathing style far more powerful than flame breathing, far surpassing the breathing style mastered by any Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps, appeared before Riesel's eyes. It seemed as if the swordsman intentionally wanted to pass on this breathing style to Riesel, moving over and over again, demonstrating tirelessly. After hundreds of repetitions, the swordsman seemed to have endless energy, not tired at all, not fatigued in the slightest. His hand holding the sword didn't even tremble, and his posture remained flawless from start to finish. However, there was only one problem. Sun breathing consists of 13 sword forms. Every time he moved, the swordsman mechanically uttered that sentence, but from start to finish, only 12 sword forms were displayed in front of Riesel by the swordsman. Dance, clear blue sky, raging sun, fake rainbow, fire wheel, burning bones, summer sun, sunflower thrust, solar heat haze, setting sun transformation, beneficent radiance, sun halo dragon head dance, and flame dance. Clearly, the sword forms demonstrated by the swordsman remained only these 12, never reaching the 13th sword form after countless repetitions. Yet, the swordsman repeated that sentence time and again, telling Riesel repeatedly that the breathing style named sun breathing indeed consisted of 13 sword forms. Why? Perhaps only Riesel, who was familiar with the original work, would know why. Just as Riesel's breathing synchronized completely with the swordsman's, and all the swordsman's sword forms were engraved into his mind, etched into the depths of his heart, the swordsman finally stopped moving. I'll leave it to you. At the very end, Riesel heard that barely audible murmur from the swordsman. Ding! Ling! As the swordsman's earrings swayed, the sound of wind chimes resounded again. Riesel felt as if the scene before him was fading away, his consciousness gradually drifting, slowly disappearing from this dream. Chapter 143, Fierce Battle in the Train. After slumbering for who knew how long, Riesel's consciousness began to return. As the dream faded away, Riesel could clearly feel himself returning to reality, back to the state of sitting on the train. It was as if he had been dozing off, his body gently swaying with the movement of the train, the sound of the train whistle becoming clearer in his ears. Everything became real again, unlike in the dream where even the wind and sunlight had no sensation. However, with the return of sensation and senses coming back, Riesel was surprised to find that his surroundings had drastically changed. Boom! A tentacle resembling a meat pillar swung past him, hitting an empty seat and smashing it to pieces. The once somewhat desolate wooden carriage now resembled the inside of a giant intestine, with wooden walls transformed into fleshy walls from which flesh-like tentacles sprouted and thrashed wildly. What the hell? Riesel looked at the scene with a hint of astonishment. Hey, you finally woke up, Bento boy. Just as Riesel felt perplexed, a familiar hearty voice reached his ears. Not far away, Kyujiro stood, wielding a Japanese sword known as katana with a black and red blade, fighting off tentacles attacking from all directions. Hoo! Ha! Kyujiro assumed an aye-aye stance, lowering his body, inhaling a large amount of air, simultaneously breathing and murmuring. Flame breathing. Fourth form, blooming flame undulation. Flames erupted from Kyujiro's sword as he swung it like a windmill, slashing extremely fast in all directions. In an instant, a vortex of flames appeared in the carriage filled with flesh walls and tentacles, blasting outward with his slash. Hu Kai! All the incoming tentacles were instantly cut into pieces as if melted by the high temperature of the vortex of flames. Kyujiro continued to wield his blazing sword, relentlessly cutting through the attacking tentacles. Swish! Swish! Even so, the tentacles on the train seemed endless. Just as they were cut off, new ones immediately sprouted from the flesh walls and swarmed toward Kyujiro. Just as Kyujiro was about to counterattack, a silver flash of light passed by at a high speed. Hu Kai! Although the silver light merely grazed the tentacles, they were immediately shredded into countless pieces as if cut by a cutting machine. Riesel, holding a bright silver short sword, appeared behind Kyujiro as if teleporting, his speed too fast for Kyujiro to react. Seeing Riesel, Kyujiro's pupils contracted for a moment before a big smile spread across his face. Oh, just like young Mizuguchi, crying boy, and boar head boy said, Bento boy, you're really something. After saying that, Kyujiro directly exposed his back to Riesel, swiftly slicing through the tentacles that attacked him with a flick of his blazing sword. Riesel seemed even more relaxed than Kyujiro, just standing still, casually swinging his sword with fast slashes. Each tentacle that came at him was effortlessly sliced into pieces by the silver light flashing extremely fast. What's the situation now? Riesel took a moment to ask Kyujiro behind him. It's not good at all. Kyujiro responded straightforwardly. In short, it seems we've been targeted by the demon hidden on this train since we boarded. When the conductor checked our tickets, we all got ensnared by the demon's blood demon art and ended up in some kind of dream. If young Mizuguchi hadn't snapped us out of it, things could have gotten messy. While everyone was trapped in the dream, Tanjiro was the first to figure out how to break free and return to reality, thereby awakening everyone else. In truth, the reason everyone was under remote hypnosis was because the tickets were contaminated with demon blood. Tanjiro managed to burn everyone's ticket, allowing them to wake up except for Riesel. Since Riesel was not truly under the demon's hypnosis, he remained in the dream, causing Kyujiro to stay and fight the tentacles to protect him. Without a doubt, this development was almost identical to the original work. Nevertheless, as Riesel suspected, the demon behind the scenes didn't just tamper with the tickets but also manipulated the entire train. The reason the train looked grotesque, turning into flesh walls with tentacles everywhere, was that the demon on this Mugen train had merged with the train itself, turning it into his own body. In other words, where Riesel and the others were now was not the Mugen train, but within the demon's body disguised as it. It seems the demon wants to devour all 200 passengers on the train at once, so we decide to split up. Some are going to find that demon and behead them, while others are protecting passengers in other carriages. Kyujiro explained as he pushed forward like a pillar of fire, slashing through countless tentacles all the way, even cutting through several other carriages. In these carriages, where tentacles were reaching for sleeping passengers, they all turned into meat chunks shattered by Kyujiro's swift charge and slashes. He continued to charge and slash through several carriages in succession, then in the blink of an eye, turned back like a pillar of fire, his speed leaving people amazed. That's it. The situation is very serious. Despite saying that, the smile never left Kyujiro's face, giving off not a hint of tension but rather a feeling of being in complete control. Seeing this, Riesel responded with a faint smile as well. With a flicker of his body, he turned into a hurricane, rushing out in an instant, and passing through several carriages. Hu Kai, Hu Kai, Hu Kai, asterisk. Where the hurricane passed, sword lights burst out like a storm, slashing through tentacles reaching for passengers, reducing them to pieces. In no time, Riesel returned to his original position. Along the way, not only were the tentacles sliced apart, but even the flesh walls were cut into a bloody mess, temporarily preventing their regeneration. Kyujiro's expression changed once again, clearly shocked. It couldn't be helped, since the strength displayed by Riesel greatly surpassed his imagination. Such strength would undoubtedly qualify him as a Hashira within the Demon Slayer Corps. No, even as a Hashira, it seemed that Riesel at this moment surpassed even that. I told you, didn't I? Riesel paid no heed to the surprise he caused Kyujiro with his performance. Fighting a powerful demon while protecting 200 passengers at the same time is challenging even for you. Yeah, I admit my shortcomings. Kyujiro nodded in acknowledgement before exclaiming loudly. But it's all right. No matter what, I will protect everyone here. I won't let anyone die, definitely. In the next moment, the flames on Kyujiro's body suddenly burned even more fiercely. As he prepared to exert himself both mentally and physically, ready to make a desperate effort, Riesel stopped him. No need for that, Riesel said frankly. We're inside the demon's body, so as long as we stay on this train, we'll be constantly fighting this demon and struggling to protect the passengers inside. Instead of just defending, we should focus on finding a way to evacuate them. As if understanding Riesel's words, the surrounding flesh walls writhed, immediately sprouting countless tentacles, attacking him. Whoosh! Asterisk. A silver light suddenly flashed, cutting off all the tentacles in one strike, causing them to fall to the ground. Boom! Asterisk. Meanwhile, Kyujiro once again transformed into a fiery pillar, dashing extremely fast through several carriages, cutting off tentacles one by one, before returning to Riesel's side. I understand what you mean, but the train is moving at its fastest speed. How do we evacuate 200 passengers from here? Kyujiro asked, his sword ignited, raising the temperature inside the entire carriage. Simple. Let's stop the train first. Riesel answered calmly, swinging countless sword lights to cut off tentacles and flesh walls, then turning his head to Kyujiro. Later, I will stop or even dismantle this train. When that happens, you must evacuate all the passengers as soon as possible. Is that all right? Do you have a way to stop this train? Kyujiro paused for a moment, then without hesitation, he promised. No problem. I'll get all the passengers out as soon as the train stops. Good. After cutting off several tentacles, Riesel turned around, looked at Kyujiro, and warned. Be careful. Ooh. Kyujiro grinned, without looking back. You too. Riesel smiled softly, then disappeared on the spot. Feeling Riesel's aura disappear behind him, Kyujiro's smile grew stronger on his face. The journey this time is truly amazing. Getting to know such an outstanding friend, I, Rengoku Kyujiro, feel deeply honored. Inside his mind, Kyujiro was overjoyed, but at the same time, he also felt a bit puzzled. But, I can't help but feel that Bento Boy's breathing has changed somehow. What a strange feeling. Maybe just my imagination. As Kyujiro thought like that, tentacles came at him again. Let's focus on completing the mission first. Kyujiro concentrated, pushing away distracting thoughts, enveloped by flames, rushing toward other carriages. Toot. Asterisk. In the wilderness, atop the railroad tracks, a train sped through the darkness, emitting bursts of steam whistles and the sound of its wheels. However, this train was now covered in flesh walls everywhere, looking somewhat grotesque and nauseating. Inosuke, hurry up. At this moment, Tanjiro was running on the roof of the train, shouting at the boar-headed youth beside him as he ran. I know, watch me, boar rush. Inosuke wielded two saw-like swords, charging recklessly toward the front of the train. Boom. Asterisk. However, just then, a figure smashed through the train's wall, leaping onto the heads of the two. Tanjiro looked up, astonished. By Big Brother. Chapter 144, Lower 1. The one who flew out from the Mugen train was naturally Rizel. He broke through the train's flesh walls and soared out from within, leaping high in front of Tanjiro and Inosuke, like an arrow released, slicing through the night sky and landing ahead on the train tracks. Toot. Asterisk. At the same time, the train, with its long whistle and the sound of its wheels, rushed like a rampaging steel beast toward Rizel, who had landed on its tracks. Danger. Seeing this scene, Tanjiro, standing on the roof of the train, was greatly terrified. Oi, bento eater, get out of there fast. Even Inosuke was panicked, roaring angrily in Rizel's direction. Although both of them were from the countryside and grew up in the mountains without much exposure to the world, it didn't stop them from understanding how dangerous Rizel's current actions were. It was obvious that being hit by such a large steel vehicle would result in serious injuries, not to mention that the train was still moving at an astonishing speed. Once hit, it was absolutely impossible for Rizel to survive without severe injuries. Moreover, the train was now merged with a demon, making it basically impossible to stop, not even to slow down. Rizel's act of landing on the train tracks and standing in front of the train was tantamount to seeking death. Even so, Tanjiro and Inosuke were shocked to find that Rizel not only didn't choose to evade but instead stood firm, facing the rampaging steel beast heading toward him with an extremely calm expression. Damn it, Inosuke couldn't help but rush forward. Not only him, but Tanjiro also drew his black sword and charged forward. Inosuke, Tanjiro shouted anxiously, we have to cut off the demon's head before Big Brother gets hit. I know, Inosuke responded loudly. Both of them tightened their grip on their swords, emitting a barely noticeable warmth. Their swords were known as Nichiren swords, weapons specially made for the Demon Slayer Corps, forged from special materials called Scarlet Crimson Iron Sand, and Scarlet Ore, that absorbed sunlight, possessing properties that emitted energy similar to sunlight. The reason why the Demon Slayer Corps could hunt demons was firstly, because its members all mastered the breathing style, which allowed them to unleash powers comparable to those of demons, and secondly, because of these Nichiren swords. Generally speaking, demons were unkillable as long as they were not exposed to direct sunlight. Not only their injuries would quickly heal, but even limbs could be reattached or regenerated effortlessly. It was accurate to say they had an immortal body. However, if their head was severed by Nichiren swords, they would be killed instantly, without a chance of recovery. After all, this weapon was forged from special ore that absorbed sunlight. Cutting off a demon's head with a Nichiren sword was almost the same as exposing them to sunlight. Therefore, when demon slayers were successfully selected to join the Demon Slayer Corps, they each received a Nichiren sword tailored for them as their weapon for slaying demons. Now, since the demon controlling the Mugen train had merged with the train itself, turning it into the demon's body, there must be a vital point somewhere on the train similar to a demon's neck. By severing this point and cutting off the demon's head merged with the train, they could kill him and stop the train. Tanjiro and Inosuke had climbed onto the roof for this purpose, while Zenitsu remained inside the carriage, protecting the passengers. However, now that Rizel suddenly appeared and was about to be hit by the train, the two of them had to behead the demon as soon as possible and slay him. Only then could they save Rizel. Unfortunately, they barely had time to find the demon's vital point, let alone cut off his neck. Tanjiro and Inosuke knew that the demon's neck was likely buried under the front of the train, so they tried to locate and sever it as soon as possible, but time simply didn't allow it. No, It's too late. Quick, dodge, bento eater. Tanjiro and Inosuke could only run on the roof of the train, shouting urgently. In this situation, Rizel, bathed in the glaring light of the charging train, slowly raised one hand. Decompose. A red vortex surged in Rizel's palm. Toot. Asterisk. With the whistle of the roaring locomotive, the train finally collided, hitting Rizel's body hard. Tanjiro and Inosuke showed expressions of despair one after another. However, the scene of blood splattering and flesh being torn apart they imagined did not occur. Buzz. Asterisk. With a sound resembling a tremor, Rizel's hand, reaching out toward the oncoming train, first made contact with the locomotive, allowing the red vortex to pass through his palm like a hurricane, instantly transmitting to the entire body of the train. Following that, Rizel suddenly punched with his fist. Bang. Asterisk. Amidst an ear-splitting roar, the train, completely covered by red waves, was dismantled under the influence of Rizel's fierce punch. Bang. 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 Asterisk. With a series of exploding sounds, the train burst apart section by section, the front separated, and the carriages disconnected from each other, becoming fragmented. Rizel did not completely decompose the train into nothingness, he just roughly dismantled it. After all, there were passengers on the train, including Kyujiro and the three main characters. He didn't want to risk decomposing them all into nothingness. Therefore, he only dismantled the train, causing the front to separate, the carriages to disconnect, and the wheels to burst, turning into fragments falling all around the train tracks, making various parts fly in the air. Undoubtedly, this scene was an exceptionally magnificent sight. Of course, Tanjiro and Inosuke, standing on top of the train, naturally were thrown off. Are you fucking kidding me? Witnessing the spectacular scene of a train being crushed by a punch before their eyes, Tanjiro and Inosuke found themselves flung into the air, screaming in shock as their shouts echoed far into the distance. Naturally, neither of them knew what magic was. In their eyes, Rizel appeared to have punched the oncoming train with his bare fist, causing it to fall apart. In reality, when Rizel used decomposition magic on the train, it had already begun to decompose. However, because he only broke down its structure, the train hadn't completely decomposed yet. It was like a set of building blocks. Before being knocked over, it could still maintain its train appearance. Consequently, Rizel simply punched it, breaking apart the blocks and causing the train to be dismantled. Nonetheless, Tanjiro and Inosuke were oblivious to the complexities of the situation. All they knew was that Rizel had punched the train and it fell apart. That was way too strong, right? Too strong, wasn't it? Too strong. Tanjiro continued shouting like crazy while still in midair. That guy is amazing. Amazing, I tell you. Mwahaha. He blew up the Lord of the Land, Santoro. Inosuke danced around in midair excitedly, thoroughly thrilled. I'm Tanjiro. Tanjiro protested. After flying through the air for a while, the two of them finally landed on the ground together. Tanjiro. Inosuke. At this moment, Zenitsu emerged from the wreckage of the train carriage, carrying a wooden box on his back, tears streaming down his face in a mixture of fear and relief. The train fell apart. It derailed. Am I missing any body parts? Am I? Please tell me I'm not. That was scary. Zenitsu cried out in a dramatic display, genuinely believing that the train had derailed and worried he might have lost a limb. Meanwhile, Kyujiro, upon sensing the train start to stop just as Rizel had said, wasted no time in unleashing the full power of flame-breathing, fourth form, blooming flame undulation. A vortex of flames spiraled through every carriage, stabilizing the derailed train with the impact on each carriage, bringing it to a halt on the train tracks. So it really did dismantle, Kyujiro remarked, emerging from one of the carriages. He strolled leisurely as he surveyed the chaotic scene around him, especially the dismantled train before letting out a hearty laugh. As for Rizel, he glanced briefly at the locomotive, which had been flung off the train tracks and lay beside him. In the next moment, flesh walls surged continuously from the locomotive. How is this possible? How could something like this happen? Within the flesh walls, a boy's voice cried out in agony and disbelief. Without a doubt, this was the demon's voice that merged with the Mugen train. Rizel happened to know the identity of this demon. Lower 1. Enmu, the most powerful lower rank among the 12 Kazuki, second only to the 6 upper ranks, possessed the power to hypnotize people and manipulate dreams at will. On top of that, he was the only surviving lower rank at present. Due to the lower 5 being indirectly defeated by the 3 main characters and some lower ranks eventually being hunted down by the Hashira, Enmu was the last of his kind. This was because the Demon King, the progenitor of all demons in this world, had recently disbanded the lower ranks, executing most of them, except for Enmu. As the only surviving lower rank, Enmu indeed had some amazing abilities. Being able to hypnotize the Flame Hashira and the 3 main characters, as well as merge with a train, this kind of ability was beyond the reach of ordinary demons. Unfortunately, this last surviving lower rank would also meet his end here. Impossible, I haven't lost yet, I must devour everyone here. Kill the Hashira and that little rascal with earrings. Gaahhhhhhh. Enmu struggled, causing the locomotive to lurch. Tap 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 tap. At the same time, Riesel calmly approached the locomotive step by step, his face serene like a still lake. Chapter 145, A Nightmare. As Riesel approached, Enmu naturally felt it. Felt what? Naturally, he felt fear. As a lower rank closest to the upper ranks, few things could make Enmu afraid. In his eyes, demon slayers seemed no different from ordinary humans. He was not even afraid of Hashira at all and even wanted to kill them to gain merit. For demons, the Demon Slayer Corps, which had always been hunting them, was undoubtedly quite annoying. However, since the Demon King had long ordered the hunting of Hashira, Enmu had never feared them. Otherwise, he wouldn't have devised a plan to merge with the Mugen train and devour the Flame Hashira along with the other 200 passengers. As long as he could kill a Hashira and consume a large number of humans, he could become stronger and receive the Demon King's reward. Perhaps he could even launch a bloody battle for a position change within the upper ranks, becoming a newcomer in the upper ranks that had not had a member change in over 100 years. Therefore, Enmu had always considered his move on the Mugen train with a mindset geared toward entertainment and enjoyment. After all, what he liked most was witnessing the suffering and despair of others. Whether it was the Hashira or the 200 passengers, their agonizing struggles before death would surely be interesting. Every time Enmu thought of that, he felt a sense of pleasure. Unfortunately, the reality proved that even demons like Enmu, when faced with incomprehensible things, would still feel fear when it was time to fear. The moment Riesel stopped and dismantled the entire train with a single punch, it became truly incomprehensible to Enmu. Especially since the train had already merged with his body, he could feel even more vividly the inexplicable events that had occurred in that split second. It felt as if his whole body was forcibly torn apart by an unknown power, with even the very things that constituted his existence being invaded, controlled, and ripped apart. It was as absurd as watching his own cells being pulled out of his body one by one while wide awake. As a result, when Enmu saw Riesel approaching him, his mind exploded. Eyes of forced unconscious sleep. With Enmu's yell, meat pillars suddenly shot out from the locomotive, rushing toward Riesel. On the meat pillars, countless eyes were growing, staring straight at Riesel, emitting a strange wave that projected onto his body through their gaze. Demons naturally possessed powers beyond those of humans, powers that ordinary humans couldn't compare to. In addition to abilities such as an undying body and superhuman physical prowess, some demons' bodies also possessed special abilities like magic or superpowers, some with strange effects, others akin to ultimate techniques, offering a wide range of possibilities. It was known as the Blood Demon Art, a special ability exclusive to demons. Demons possessing Blood Demon Art generally had stronger abilities than those without. Some particularly powerful demons could even possess multiple Blood Demon Arts. Enmu's Blood Demon Art could force his targets into sleep, causing them to experience dreams. What made it terrifying was his ability to control the people, events, and objects within these dreams, keeping those affected by his Blood Demon Art forever immersed without their knowledge. Once affected by his Blood Demon Art, no matter who it was, their consciousness would completely separate from their physical body, unable to move as long as they didn't wake up from the dream. In order to wake up from the dream, there was usually only one way. That was for the person trapped in the dream to muster the courage to commit suicide. Only then could they wake up from the dream completely on their own. If Tanjiro hadn't woken up this way and burned Kyujiro's and the others' tickets, they wouldn't have awakened. Enmu's blood demon art was truly powerful, as evidenced by the 200 passengers on the train remaining asleep, lost in their dreams even as the train caused a significant commotion by derailing and had its carriages separated. Now, Enmu used this powerful blood demon art on Rizel, known as Eyes of Forced Unconscious Sleep. This wasn't performed through blood-soaked tickets like the previous long-distance method but rather through direct eye contact for hypnosis. In terms of effect and power, it was definitely much stronger than the previous long-distance hypnosis. Unless eye contact was avoided, the success rate of this direct hypnotic technique was 100%, which meant it was unstoppable. Even the upper ranks, if caught in this hypnosis, would surely fall. This monster has already locked eyes with me, so he will definitely. As Enmu thought like that, he froze and suddenly widened his eyes. Single quote question mark exclamation mark single quote. In front of him, Rizel indeed met the gazes of countless eyes growing on the meat pillars, but instead of being hypnotized, he only furrowed his brow, his face twisted in disgust. Disgusting shits. After muttering that, Rizel brandished his bright silver short sword, suddenly unleashing several sword lights at incredible speed. Swish, 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 asterisk. Several meat pillars were instantly destroyed by the sword lights, cut into countless pieces, and scattered on the ground. Eyes of Forced Unconscious Sleep. Enmu screamed hysterically and caused the locomotive to grow several more meat pillars, making the eyes on the meat pillars all look at Rizel, releasing the full power of hypnosis. Unfortunately, this power couldn't even make Rizel's footsteps falter. Rizel seemed to feel nothing, calmly stepping forward toward Enmu, step by step. Enmu stared blankly at Rizel's figure, who, compared to himself transformed into a massive train, was undoubtedly exceedingly small. Is this a nightmare? Enmu whispered in a daze. With those final words, a red vortex swiftly crashed into the locomotive where Enmu's head was. Boom. Asterisk. This time, Rizel showed no mercy, delivering maximum output, using decomposition magic to its peak, and decomposing the entire locomotive into nothingness. BZZZT. Asterisk. With the disappearance of the locomotive, the flesh walls that were still squirming in the carriages stopped, withered, and then completely reduced to ashes. Ultimately, decomposition magic far exceeded the regeneration limit of a lower rank, rendering Enmu unable to recover at all. And so, the last surviving lower rank of the 12 Kazuki met a tragic end. As for Rizel, he still stood in place, looking at the huge pit that appeared with the disappearance of the locomotive. His eyes were calm, devoid of pity. Man-eating demon, this is the end you deserve. After leaving those indifferent words, Rizel turned around and left, leaving the empty pit behind. At last, the man-eating incident on the Mugen train had come to a close. Not only had the ringleader demon been slain, but none of the 200 passengers were harmed, and the members of the Demon Slayer Corps emerged unscathed as well. Such results could only be deemed a perfect victory. Kyujiro had already been in contact with the Demon Slayer Corps, requesting them to send personnel to clean up the aftermath, escort the 200 passengers back, and return the dismantled Mugen train to the station. Unfortunately, the locomotive had vanished, leaving only the carriages and parts of the train behind. It remained uncertain whether it could be repaired and put back into operation in the future. Of course, these were matters of the government, unrelated to Rizel or the Demon Slayer Corps. After all, the Demon Slayer Corps was an organization not recognized by the authorities. Naturally, they had no reason to worry about matters that concerned the government. While waiting for the personnel of the Demon Slayer Corps to arrive and handle the aftermath, Rizel found himself entangled with Kyujiro. Let's go, Bento boy. Kyujiro appeared before Rizel, arms folded, staring straight ahead and shouting loudly. Come back with me to the Demon Slayer Corps. Shouting like that, Kyujiro's gaze was fixed on the other side of the mountain. Hey, where are you looking? I'm right here. Rizel stood behind Kyujiro, rolling his eyes at Kyujiro's body blocking his way. Come to the Corps with me. Kyujiro continued to face the distance, shouting loudly. Rest assured, I will recommend you to the master. Rest assured my ass. Rizel retorted and pushed aside Kyujiro blocking his path. Things haven't even ended yet, and you're already asking me to rest assured. Upon hearing that, Kyujiro stopped his antics. Haven't ended. Kyujiro turned around to look at Rizel, his face confused. Even the three main characters, who were playfully approaching, were now drawn to Rizel's words. Didn't Big Brother already take down the demon? Tanjiro asked with surprise as he grabbed his wooden box from Zenitsu, who hesitated to release it. Are there more demons? Zenitsu, no longer vying for the box with Tanjiro, looked wary. More demons? Ha, bring it on. Whether it's a train or whatever. Watch as this Lord Hashibira smashes them with his fists. Inosuke, his emotions soaring, seemed ignited by Rizel's earlier display. He even threw down his beloved swords on the ground, and clenched his fists, eager to try. Seeing the four's reaction, Rizel answered calmly. It's an upper rank. An upper rank is coming. Upon hearing his answer, everyone's faces quickly stiffened. Especially Kyujiro, his expression changed suddenly, and the usual cheerfulness vanished. Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke had even more extreme reactions. Coming. Tanjiro's nose twitched and his face changed dramatically. What's that sound? It's approaching extremely fast. Zenitsu covered his ears, his face turning pale. Over there. Inosuke quickly picked up his swords and pointed fiercely in a certain direction. Whoosh! Asterisk. Before long, the sound of wind breaking spread from afar to near as a figure shot toward them like a cannonball. Boom! Asterisk. As the figure landed with a resounding crash, it stirred up a deafening explosion and a cloud of dust. Oh, Enmu died, a young voice echoed from the dust. Hey, lower rank is just lower rank after all. Can't even step up to the plate and handle the true strong ones. Saying such words, the figure slowly emerged from the dust, and simultaneously, a powerful murderous intent instantly filled the air. Chapter 146, Upper 3. This is, as astonishing murderous intent permeated the entire area, Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke couldn't help but take a step back, their pupils trembling, seemingly shaken. Since they each possessed exceptionally keen senses, murderous intent, which even some ordinary people could sense, undoubtedly had a magnified effect on these three youths, causing them a lot of distress. In this situation, Tanjiro unconsciously gripped his sword, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Inosuke resembled an enraged beast, his entire body bristling with sweat-soaked fur. Zenitsu hugged his head and squatted directly on the ground, his face pale, letting out a sharp scream of fear. You three, step back. Even Kyujiro's expression was grave as he shouted at the three. He quickly stood in front of Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu, body lowered, hand already resting on the hilt of his sword. Only Rizel remained calm, gazing ahead with cold eyes. In front of them, the figure emerging slowly from the dust finally revealed his full form. He was a young man with peach-red short hair, golden eyes, deep blue tattoos covering his entire body, and fingernails painted blood red. He wasn't tall and looked even younger than Kyujiro, wearing a short, sleeveless dark purple-pink haori with an open chest, prayer beads hanging from his ankles, and bare feet. He looked like a martial artist, clearly someone not to be trifled with. However, that wasn't the most important part. What was most striking was the characters engraved in his eyes. In his pair of golden eyes, 2 Japanese characters were engraved. Left eye, 3, right eye, upper rank. This was the characteristic of the 12 Kazuki, symbols of their rank and identity. Upper ranks have characters engraved in both eyes. Lower ranks have characters engraved in one eye. Needless to say, the demon before them, without a doubt, was an upper rank. Upper 3, Kyujiro muttered solemnly. Upper 3, meaning the third strongest demon aside from the Demon King, was now standing before them. I am Akaza. The upper 3, Akaza, nonchalantly revealed his name. However, as he looked toward Rizel and Kyujiro, his face broke into a smile full of fighting intent. Ah, I see. Akaza seemed to understand something, his smile turned aggressive. To think there are 2 guys with such fighting spirit here. No wonder a lower rank dies so easily. Akaza's words were clearly directed at Rizel and Kyujiro. Obviously, this upper rank had seen through it all, recognizing Rizel and Kyujiro as the strongest individuals within the group. As for Tanjiro and the other 2, Akaza didn't even put them in his eyes. You're the upper 3, right? Kyujiro asked, his gaze fixed intently on Akaza. Are you also the mastermind behind the Mugen Train incident? Kyujiro speculated that Akaza had appeared here because he, along with Enmu, had orchestrated the Mugen Train incident. Unfortunately, his speculation was wrong. Don't misunderstand, I'm not like those weaklings like lower ranks. Akaza shook his head. I don't involve myself in such messy matters. I just happened to be nearby and received an order to come here because of the lower one's blunder. Order. Kyujiro's mind stirred. Someone who can command upper ranks. Could it be? Before Kyujiro could finish his thought, Akaza had already changed the subject. What are your names? Akaza surprisingly took an interest in their names, but of course, his question was directed only at Rizal and Kyujiro. I'm Rengoku Kyujiro, the Flame Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps. Kyujiro stated his name. As I thought, you're a Hashira. Akaza showed no surprise, or rather, knowing that the lower one had been slain, regardless of who it was, they would suspect that the culprit was a Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps. Within the Demon Slayer Corps, only Hashira-ranked swordsmen had the ability to kill the lower ranks of the 12 Kazuki. Other ranks of swordsmen were basically incapable of threatening the 12 Kazuki. Even Kino-ranked swordsmen were equally powerless against the lower ranks. Therefore, for the 12 Kazuki, the true threats were only the Hashira, and opponents worth noting were likewise Hashira. What about you? Akaza turned his gaze to Rizal, the smile on his face growing broader. Which Hashira are you? Unfortunately, faced with Akaza's question, Rizal remained silent, just watching him quietly. Don't want to answer, huh? Akaza expressed some regret but didn't feel annoyed. Well, strong ones always have a temper and privilege, and you indeed qualify to be arrogant. With those words, Akaza suddenly raised his head, releasing his full-blown aggressiveness without hiding it. But, I'm also strong. Crack, asterisk. As he spoke, Akaza suddenly stomped on the ground, shattering it beneath his feet. Technique development. Akaza assumed a martial arts stance, with a firm stance, performing a starting pose, causing a 12-sided snowflake pattern to appear under his feet. Destructive death. Compass needle. As the snowflake pattern emitted a bright light, his pair of golden eyes gleamed brightly. Danger. Kyujiro reacted quickly and stepped forward without hesitation. Bang. Asterisk. In that split second, Akaza disappeared from the spot. He broke through the ground, trampling the earth underfoot, darting out as fast as lightning. With a burst of explosive air, he rushed in front of Rizal. Everyone felt their vision blur. Akaza had disappeared a second ago, and the next second he suddenly appeared right in front of them, his face wearing an aggressive smile now seemingly inches away. Tanjiro couldn't react, Zenitsu couldn't react, Inosuke couldn't react either. Even though they had sensitive and keen senses, in the face of such absolute speed, their bodies couldn't keep up, let alone react. Rizal, however, calmly moved his finger slightly, preparing to draw his sword. He had no choice since Akaza was coming for him. Whoosh, asterisk. With a fearless smile, Akaza swung his fist toward Rizal. His fist was so fast that even the sound barrier couldn't keep up until it was about to touch Rizal's face. However, Rizal stopped the action he was about to take because flame breathing. Second form, rising scorching sun. A flaming blade rose violently from bottom to top, slashing toward Akaza's fist, which carried a sonic boom. Seeing the trajectory, the flaming blade would definitely cut down his arm before his fist could touch Rizal's face. Ha ha ha. However, instead of being scared, Akaza laughed madly, twisting his arm and unabashedly striking toward the fire blade that was slashing toward him. Ding! Asterisk. Akaza's fist carrying a sonic boom collided with Kyujiro's flaming blade, ultimately resulting in a crisp metal collision sound, causing the two to flick away from each other and creating distance. Flame breathing. First form, unknowing fire. Kyujiro engulfed his entire body in flames and with a fierce momentum like a rocket, charged toward Akaza. Destructive death. Disorder. Watching the blurred figure of Kyujiro charging toward him at such speed that even his silhouette was indistinguishable, Akaza's fighting intent erupted. Instead of retreating, he advanced, striking out with both hands like a machine gun. Boom! Asterisk. Amid the exploding sound, Kyujiro's charge was blocked by Akaza. Kyujiro's fiery slash was deflected by Akaza's fist, resembling a barrage of bullets. It seemed as though he was engulfed in a storm of punches, nearly overwhelmed by the countless fist strikes aimed at him. At this moment, the gazes of a swordsman and a demon instantly clashed, sparking intense friction. Boom, 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 asterisk. In the next moment, the fierce battle between a swordsman and a martial artist erupted without warning. Unable to land a blow, Kyujiro unleashed a flurry of flames, enveloping Akaza in a sky-covering, earth-hiding blaze. While it appeared that he was attacking every corner of Akaza's body, his intent was subtly focused on Akaza's neck, aiming most of his slashes at Akaza's vital points after feinting his attacks. Unfazed, Akaza met Kyujiro's sword with his bare fists, engaging in combat without weapons. His fists repeatedly struck Kyujiro's sword, deflecting, knocking, smashing, and even blocking it, leaving numerous blood trails on his hands and spilling copious amounts of blood. Despite the immense price of this battle, Akaza showed no fear, instead bursting with astonishing determination and fighting intent. With a smile on his face, he swung his fists wildly, unleashing fist strikes as powerful as toppling mountains and overturning seas toward Kyujiro. As for the wounds on Akaza's body, they were healed in less than a second by his terrifying regenerative ability as an upper rank. Ha ha ha, your attacks are futile, Kyujiro. Akaza laughed loudly before suddenly giving a powerful punch. Boom, asterisk. Another explosion resounded as Akaza's powerful punch landed on the sword hastily raised by Kyujiro, sending him flying after creating a shock wave. Kyujiro couldn't halt his momentum as he was sent flying, his feet skidding along the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust and debris. Destructive death. Akaza immediately assumed a defensive stance once again, preparing to unleash his fist toward Kyujiro like a cannonball. However, he suddenly halted because another figure had appeared in front of him, seemingly out of nowhere. Maintaining a steady posture, Rizel stood in front of Akaza with a calm expression on his face, but his eyes betrayed a hint of indifference. With this, Akaza's opponent was switched. Chapter 147, Becoming a Demon. Bullshit. At this moment, Akaza was very, very excited. It was because of the man who had appeared in front of him. That's a massive and inspiring fighting spirit, Akaza couldn't help but exclaim. Sensing, fighting spirit, was the driving force of Akaza's blood demon art. Those proficient in martial arts would naturally possess fighting spirit, it was just a matter of more or less. Just like how anger generated wrath, when someone had murderous intent toward another, they naturally emitted a murderous aura. Similarly, martial artists naturally emitted a fighting spirit, whether they were swordsmen or something else. Akaza's blood demon art, known as Destructive Death, Compass Needle, could sense his opponent's fighting spirit like a compass, making his attacks and evasive actions as precise as if being drawn by a magnet. The stronger his opponent's fighting spirit, the stronger the reaction of the compass needle, and the higher the intensity and precision of his corresponding technique or attack. With this blood demon art as the foundation, Akaza used a series of precise, swift, and powerful martial arts to strike his opponents by sensing their fighting spirit. For example, the previously used, Destructive Death, Disorder, was one of them, a technique based on sensing fighting spirit, capable of striking with unparalleled precision, causing excessive damage. Akaza's perception of his opponent's fighting spirit was extremely keen and sensitive, and he could easily discern his opponent's strength with this technique. In his perception, the human standing before him emitted a tremendous and awe-inspiring fighting spirit. Such a massive fighting spirit, even for him who survived for hundreds of years, he had never felt it from anyone else. Not even from that person. Therefore, Akaza was very interested in Rizel, and facing him like this excited him even more. Although it's not yet condensed, not refined enough, unable to reach the highest domain yet, judging solely from the scale of your fighting spirit, you must be the strongest in this world. Akaza spoke with his eyes gleamed as he stared at Rizel. You must be very strong, extremely strong, even have a chance to reach that highest domain, such an existence like you being just a human, it's truly a pity. At those words, Rizel raised his eyebrows slightly but said nothing. Hey, what do you say? Wanna come over to our side? Akaza extended his hand toward Rizel, smiling invitingly. I'll introduce you to that person, and make you a demon, how about it? As soon as he said that, before Rizel could speak, others became excited. Don't listen to him. Big brother. Tanjiro was the most excited, so excited that he even overcame his fear and finally managed to shout. Bento boy. Kyujiro, who was always calm, also shouted. His usual laid-back attitude was nowhere to be seen. By the way, Akaza turned to face Kyujiro. Why don't you join us too, Kyujiro? Though you may not match up to this guy, your fighting spirit is equally massive. I've slain so many Hashira, and among them, you surely rank among the best. It's such a waste for humans, really. Just become a demon, and I promise you'll become even stronger. I refuse, Kyujiro answered without hesitation. I can't think of any reason to become a demon. His remark surprisingly caught Akaza off guard. Are you kidding me, Kyujiro? Akaza chuckled. Reasons to become a demon can be listed without much effort. Yet you claim there's no reason at all. Truly absurd. In a sense, his words weren't wrong since there were indeed many reasons to become a demon. For example, once someone became a demon, they wouldn't die or age. As long as they avoided sunlight, they would live indefinitely. Moreover, no matter how severe their injuries or illnesses, becoming a demon guaranteed recovery. Not to mention, they also gained inhuman strength, which was another advantage. Compared to fragile and powerless humans, becoming a demon, in the eyes of most people, wasn't necessarily a bad thing. However, to become a demon means living in darkness for eternity, unable to see sunlight, and having to feed on human flesh just to keep your sanity. That's the true absurdity, Kyujiro countered, his expression serious. But compared to the benefits gained, how significant is that cost? Akaza said nonchalantly, even humans spend roughly half of their days indoors, and the rest is wasted on meaningless sleep. Considering just the active hours, humans and demons aren't so different, right? Humans during the day and demons at night. As for eating humans, it's just a way to get nutrition and become stronger. It should be a good thing. What's absurd about it? Don't humans do the same to livestock like chickens or pigs? Akaza's words earned a furious glare from Tanjiro and a disapproving headshake from Kyujiro. Our values and perspectives are like the difference between heaven and earth. Continuing this talk is meaningless. Kyujiro stated firmly, regardless, I'll never become a demon. Upon hearing that, Akaza's smile instantly vanished from his face. How foolish. Human existence is nothing but a burden. Limited life, limited talent, limited time, limited body. Everything about humans is limited. With such limitations, how can you chase infinite power and reach the highest domain? Akaza's voice was cold, but his voice carried intensity. Only demons, those with infinite time and life, can free themselves from the shackles of the human body, constantly improving themselves, continuously getting stronger, until they reach that highest domain. You are such powerful beings, would you really be willing to watch your strength fade away, only to disappear when your body ages and your lifespan ends? If that's truly what you desire, then you are truly foolish. Akaza's words made Tanjiro unable to hold back anymore. Where's the foolishness? Tanjiro exclaimed angrily. Our lives may be limited, but it's because of that limitation that many valuable things emerge. That's not something as shallow as being summarized by mere strength. However, his impassioned words only earned a cold response. Shut up. Whoosh. Asterisk. Akaza suddenly swung a powerful punch at Tanjiro. His punch, although clearly striking through the air, caused a resounding boom in the atmosphere. In no time, his punch transformed into a gust of wind, roaring toward Tanjiro's head. Boom. Asterisk. Akaza's powerful punch hit, creating an impact like thunder. However, this punch didn't hit Tanjiro, but Kyujiro, who arrived just in time and blocked it with his sword. Mr. Rengoku, Tanjiro shouted at Kyujiro, who appeared in front of him. Be careful, young Kamado. Kyujiro didn't turn back, just gave a word of caution. Akaza maintained his punching posture and spoke to Tanjiro with a cold voice. Weaklings should recognize their weaknesses. It's your weakness that makes you see trivial things as important. As a weakling, how can you grasp that the path of the strong can't tolerate anything unnecessary? Those are just obstacles holding people back from getting stronger. After saying that, Akaza looked again at Rizal, who hadn't moved at all. You must understand what I'm saying, right? Akaza smiled. No, it's okay if you don't understand. When you encounter a situation where you cannot move forward no matter what you do, you will know that your human body is just a shackle. Only by becoming a demon can you continue to grow stronger, until you reach that so-called highest domain. Akaza couldn't finish his sentence since Rizel interrupted his words, finally speaking up. Yes, exactly. Akaza, seeing Rizel finally speak, immediately showed a happy smile. You still have a chance now, you can gain more time to improve yourself. Come on, become a demon and you can be like me, always fighting, always getting stronger. At this point, Akaza had already opened his arms wide, ready to accept Rizel at any moment. Unfortunately, do you know how much time it took me from being just an ordinary human that you looked down upon to having the power I have now? Rizel asked in a calm tone, leaving Akaza stunned. In the next moment, Akaza got the answer. 4 months. Rizel continued, suddenly smiling at Akaza. I've grown from an ordinary human with no power to this point in just 4 months. With those words, not only Akaza but even Kyujiro and the other 3 showed expressions of disbelief. Impossible. Akaza vehemently denied it. Your massive fighting spirit is obviously the result of years of training. It's basically impossible to achieve it with just a human body in a mere 4 months. He simply couldn't believe Rizel's words. Just because you can't do it doesn't mean others can't, Rizel said calmly, raising his eyebrows. The fact remains, whether you deny it or not. Akaza's face immediately darkened. What I want to tell you is, what you can't do, don't preach it to others as an absolute truth. Rizel continued in the same calm tone. You can't become consistently strong with a human body. You can't reach the highest domain unless you become a demon. Who told you that bullshit? At least, I haven't encountered any bottlenecks yet, let alone know what limits are, so there's no reason to abandon my human body. Besides, in my opinion, what you call the highest domain is not such a difficult domain to reach. Perhaps the next time you see me, I will have already reached it. Of course, that is. Rizel paused, gazing at Akaza's face for a while before continuing with a smile that wasn't quite a smile. If you can leave here alive today. Upon hearing that, Akaza's complexion immediately turned ugly. Technique development. He stopped talking and assumed a stance. Destructive death. Compass needle. A snowflake pattern appeared under his feet, causing his fighting spirit to surge. Seeing this, Rizel narrowed his eyes and suddenly shouted. Rengoku, lend me your sword. Kyujiro hesitated for a moment, then quickly threw his sword to Rizel. Rizel reached out and caught the sword. As I thought, this kind of sword is more suitable, huh? Rizel weighed the sword in his hand as if confirming something, murmuring to himself. Hoo, ha. Shortly afterward, Rizel started to breathe in and out, and gradually, the air around him began to grow increasingly hotter. Chapter 148, Sugikuni Yorichi. As Rizel breathing in and out, the abnormality around him quickly caught everyone's attention. His fighting spirit is changing. Akaza's eyes narrowed slightly. In his perception, Rizel's fighting spirit suddenly changed. It wasn't a drastic change, still as massive and strong, but there was a sense of dangerous substance flowing within it, at least for him. Unlike Akaza, the others each sensed the abnormality differently. His heartbeat suddenly became so fast. Zenitsu, who had been crouching with his hands on his head, blurted out nervously. There's a tingling sensation all over my skin, what is he doing? Inosuke rubbed his exposed arms. The rhythm and precision of his breathing have changed. Kyujiro sounded surprised and puzzled. As for Tanjiro, he stared blankly at Rizel at this moment, feeling strangely familiar with something about him. At this moment, the aura emanating from Rizel's body gave Tanjiro a sense of déjà vu as if he was seeing his deceased father. In a daze, he even felt as if he was looking at a snowy landscape, seeing his father wearing priest attire dancing the Kagura dance. Suddenly, the scene changed, turning into a recent memory. In a mountain infested with spiders, a demon stood silently. One of his eyes bore Japanese characters. Unlike Akaza, who had both eyes engraved with characters, this demon only had his left eye bore 2 characters. One was lower rank, and the other was 5. It was unmistakably Rui, the lower 5 who was recently defeated. Several months ago, Tanjiro encountered this lower 5 and battled with him. In that battle, Tanjiro was ravaged, subjected to unreasonable violence, repeatedly injured, and knocked down, until his sword broke like a butterfly caught in a spider's web, becoming prey to Rui. Rui shot threads capable of shredding a human body into pieces toward him, weaving them into a net, literally leaving him with nowhere to escape. However, in the very end, Tanjiro unleashed that technique. Hinokami Kagura dance. It was the Kagura dance his father once performed in the snow. It was the dance his father had taught and used. Just as Tanjiro was forced into a corner facing the arrogantly impossible to defeat Spider Demon, he unleashed the Kagura dance passed down through generations of his family, even resorting to using unknown breathing, unleashing astonishing power, momentarily overpowering Rui. In truth, the reason Tanjiro came to the Mugen Train to find Kyujiro, aside from the mission from the Demon Slayer Corps, was for another reason. He wanted to ask Kyujiro if he knew why Hinokami Kagura had turned into a breathing style usable for combat. All of this was the idea of the current insect Hashira, Kocho Shinobu. As one of the few Hashira who harbored goodwill toward Tanjiro, upon learning about Hinokami Kagura from his mouth, Shinobu thought that Kyujiro, who mastered flame breathing, might know something. Perhaps because Hinokami Kagura and flame breathing were quite similar in power and characteristics, both employing swordsmanship that conjured flames. For this reason, Tanjiro came here, to Kyujiro's side, to uncover the secret of Hinokami Kagura passed down through generations of his family. Unfortunately, before Tanjiro could find the opportunity to inquire, the incident on the Mugen Train occurred. And now, Tanjiro was surprised to find himself facing off against the upper three, with Rizel holding Kyujiro's Nichiren sword in his hand. Upon entering the state of total concentration breathing, Rizel's appearance was identical to that of himself and his father when using Hinokami Kagura. What's going on? Unfortunately, Tanjiro couldn't utter the question in his mind, because he smelled danger. Watch out! Sensing the scent coming from Akaza, Tanjiro couldn't help but shout frantically at Rizel. However, before his voice could fully resonate, Akaza's impending killing move was already unleashed. Destructive Death. Annihilation type. A terrifying power suddenly erupted around Akaza's body, forming a dreadful shockwave, like an explosion, accompanying his two fists as it surged toward Rizel. This was the most powerful technique among Akaza's martial arts techniques, named Annihilation type. It concentrated all his fighting spirit and strength into the palm of his hands, which he used to strike his target with tremendous force, creating two powerful circular shockwaves. Feeling the increasingly formidable threat from Rizel's fighting spirit, Akaza no longer held back, directly unleashing this technique. If Akaza stood in Rizel's place, facing the charging Mugen Train on the train tracks, this might not have directly destroyed the entire train, but the locomotive that collided directly with this technique would certainly have been crushed. Such a tremendously powerful attack, like a tsunami, swept out like an exploding shockwave, tearing through the earth, tearing through the air, and thundering toward Rizel. Quote? Seeing this, the faces of Kyujiro and the other three changed drastically, all shouting something to Rizel, but their voices were drowned out by the explosion-like shockwave as they were blown away by the forceful wind and thrown from their position. Rizel, holding Kyujiro's Nichiren sword, stood directly against this attack, giving the impression of a tiny human about to be engulfed by a tornado, powerless and fragile. Yet, faced with this utterly destructive attack, Rizel unexpectedly closed his eyes. Boom. A shockwave, like an explosion, instantly engulfed Rizel's body, shattering the ground beneath him. But within this astonishing shockwave, flames emerged. Like the sun rising at dawn. Like light appearing in the darkness. As the flames ignited, it suddenly expanded. Whoosh. Amidst the roar, the shockwave was sliced in half by the erupting flames. At this moment, a fierce wind howled, sand filled the air, and the severed shockwave swept in all directions, stirring up an unstoppable gust, whistling as it went. Meanwhile, the flames that cut through the shockwave leapt into the air, transforming into a dazzling fiery wheel, burning through the atmosphere, pushing back the impact. Like a fleeting ray of sunlight, it suddenly tore through the void, slashing toward Akaza. In everyone's eyes, this stunning display was akin to the embodiment of the sun gracefully dancing into existence. Akaza only had time to shrink his pupils to the size of a pinhead and couldn't do anything else, not even change his stance, and remained in the posture of unleashing destructive death annihilation type. At this moment, the flying flames cut through his field of vision, slicing through his fighting spirit, and ultimately slicing through his neck, disappearing behind him. Swish. Asterisk. Sun breathing. First form. Only then did Rizel appear in the spot where the flames vanished, standing behind Akaza, back turned to him, slowly sheathing his sword. Dance. Click. With the clicking sound of the sword sheathing, everything returned to calm in that single moment. The shockwave vanished. The flames vanished. The destructive power vanished. It was as if nothing had ever existed, as if everything that had just happened was merely an illusion, making the entire scene fall into silence. Whether it was Kyujiro or the three youths, they all lay on the ground, eyes wide open, watching everything unfold, completely devoid of sound. Even Akaza fell silent. Rizel also remained silent and standing calmly, his expression unchanged. Strangely, this silence persisted for who knew how long. "Hey, what's your name?" At a certain moment, Akaza asked in a hoarse voice, a question that had previously gone unanswered. Rizel didn't turn around but still heard Akaza's question. Yet, upon hearing Akaza's question, Rizel's initial reaction wasn't to give his name but to recall that dream, recalling that swordsman who had meticulously taught him every move of sun breathing. Ding! Ling! In this silence, the Hanafuda earrings on Tanjiro's ears swayed just right, emitting a wind chime-like sound. Sugikuni Yorichi, Rizel uttered. His name. Sugikuni Yorichi. Akaza's voice began to slow down, lowering. "I will remember that name." As his words fell, his head gradually tilted from his neck and fell from his body. Thud. Asterisk. His body collapsed as well, devoid of any remaining aura. Needless to say, Upper 3 Akaza had been defeated. Facing an enemy whom even the Hashira found terrifying, a young man who had not yet joined the Demon Slayer Corps, was not a Demon Slayer, and didn't even possess a Nichiren sword, slew an upper rank with just one slash. This was an astonishing feat. This was a terrifying achievement. Kyujiro and the other three stared dumbfounded at the scene, unable to snap out of it for a long time. Dance. Tanjiro, staring blankly at Rizel, recalled the radiant and beautiful sword technique Rizel just displayed and felt his mind in chaos. Indeed, Tanjiro's feeling wasn't wrong. When he saw the movement Rizel had just displayed, it was indeed very familiar to him. Whether it was the Hinokami Kagura Tanjiro used against the lower 5 on MT Nadagumo several months ago or the sword technique Rizel just used against the upper 3, both were named Dance. Sun breathing. Tanjiro's mind was in disarray, completely losing his ability to think. Unaware of all this, Rizel had already walked over to Kyujiro. "Nice sword but it's too heavy for me." Rizel smiled faintly as he returned Kyujiro's sword. At his words, Kyujiro smiled wryly. After all the struggle, the events of the Mugen Train were truly coming to an end. About 10 minutes later, several swordsmen wearing the uniforms of the Demon Slayer Corps, along with a group of masked individuals, swiftly arrived from the other side of the train tracks to clean up the scene, tidying up the aftermath. Chapter 149, Impossible. In the end, the incident of the Mugen Train was classified as a derailment accident by the authorities. This was bound to thrust the Mugen Train back into the headlines, and the maintenance personnel associated with the train would inevitably face a series of repercussions. After all, the Mugen Train had undergone factory inspections beforehand, and it was only after they adamantly declared no anomalies that the train was allowed to resume operation. Now, barely setting off, such a major incident occurred. It was impossible for those who previously mocked the man-eating rumors about the Mugen Train in the newspapers to escape responsibility. Perhaps the only thing worth celebrating was that all 200 passengers on the train emerged unscathed. Without a doubt, this might be considered a miracle by many. As for the existence of the Demon Slayer Corps, it was never mentioned from beginning to end. Because the Demon Slayer Corps was an unofficial organization, strictly speaking, even parading around with swords on the streets was not allowed. Therefore, how could they be regarded as heroes who saved 200 passengers? In fact, very few people in the world were aware of the existence of demons. Demons were nothing more than fictional creatures in the eyes of many. Even if someone told them that the incident of the Mugen train was caused by demons, most people would scoff at the idea. As a result, whether it was demons or the Demon Slayer Corps, in this incident, they were destined not to be reported on. In a sense, the Demon Slayer Corps, like demons, could only operate in the darkness. Although their existence had a long history, they were grassroots organizations formed spontaneously by people persecuted by demons. Fame and fortune mean nothing to them. Regardless, Riesel didn't necessarily see this as a bad thing. Our enemies are demons, human-eating monsters. If we operate conspicuously outside, it's not impossible for demons to actively attack us or even attack people around us. That's very dangerous and must be avoided. That was the argument Kyujiro put forward before, telling Riesel that the Demon Slayer Corps had narrowly escaped being wiped out by demons several times in history by being hidden. Needless to say, the Demon Slayer Corps mostly operated covertly and was not publicly acknowledged. Especially the whereabouts of the Master, the leader of the Demon Slayer Corps, were top secret. Not only was his location absolutely concealed, but the routes to get there were changed periodically. Apart from the Hashira, few people know how to reach there. And now, I'll take you to see the Master. Young Sugikuni. Kyujiro declared such, even addressing Riesel by the name he said to Akaza. Is that okay? Riesel didn't refuse, just asked curiously. No problem. Kyujiro nodded. It's more like, it's what the Master requested. He wants to meet you. He requested. Riesel was surprised. Does your leader already know about me? Kyujiro admitted openly. Because we have Kasugai crows. My Kasugai crow has already sent back information about you, young Sugikuni. Kasugai crows were a type of crow trained by the Demon Slayer Corps. Not only could they speak, but they also had distinct self-awareness. The Demon Slayer Corps specifically trained these crows to serve various purposes such as communication between members, transmitting information, and assigning missions, thus creating a fairly convenient intelligence network. Basically, each member of the Demon Slayer Corps received a Kasugai crow when they joined. The Corps relied on Kasugai crows to assign missions to their members located in various places, sending them to hunt demons. At the same time, Kasugai crows would gather various information and send it to the headquarters of the Demon Slayer Corps, where the Master resided, ensuring he was informed about the latest events and developments without leaving his abode. Needless to say, Riesel's presence and his performance on the Mugen train were promptly reported back to the headquarters of the Demon Slayer Corps by Kyujiro's Kasugai crow and delivered to the Master. As a result, the Kasugai crow delivered the Master's instructions to Kyujiro, expressing a desire to meet Riesel in person. How, young Sugikuni, let's go see the Master together. Kyujiro insisted, pressing down on Riesel's shoulder even before he could respond as if to prevent him from escaping. Okay, let's just get it over with, but don't get too close to me. Riesel pushed away Kyujiro's face, which had leaned in too close, agreeing to the arrangement. Riesel actually wanted to meet the Master of the Demon Slayer Corps for one simple reason, to ask for a favor. Upon learning that his destination for this dimensional travel was the world of Demon Slayer, Riesel had a plan in mind from the outset, to gather information about the breathing styles of this world. Moreover, since collecting breathing styles required involvement with the Demon Slayer Corps, Riesel had no choice but to do so. For this reason, upon hearing about the Mugen train, Riesel headed straight to the train because he knew that Kyujiro, the Flame Hashira, along with the three main characters, would be there. As for Akaza and Enmu, Riesel was merely interested in understanding the strength of the 12 Kazuki and the general strength of demons in this world. He wasn't specifically targeting or caring about them. Now, with Kyujiro presenting this opportunity to Riesel, there was naturally no reason for him to refuse. With the assistance of the Master of the Demon Slayer Corps, collecting breathing styles would be a breeze. Excellent, Kyujiro exclaimed happily, patting Riesel's shoulder repeatedly. No time to waste, let's set off immediately. His words prompted Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke to gather around eagerly, or rather, it was Tanjiro who was the most eager. Mr. Rengoku, can I come with you guys? Tanjiro asked. Got something important, young Kamado. Kyujiro paused for a moment before adding. If it's not urgent, better not casually visit Master's place. Meeting Master isn't something that happens easily. He said it like that was also to conceal the location of the Master of the Demon Slayer Corps, ensuring the safety of both the Master and the Corps' headquarters. I just have some questions to ask you too, Tanjiro explained. Even if I don't go to Master's place, it's fine. Saying so, Tanjiro stole a glance at Rizel, evidently concerned about the relationship between Hinokami Kagura and Sun Breathing that Rizel had previously used. If that's the case, then it's no problem. Kyujiro, having learned the whole story, said very frankly. Since that's settled, why don't you all come to my place first? Let me treat you. Thank you, Tanjiro said excitedly, smiling as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Zenitsu and Inosuke seemed to have no objections. Hey, Big Eyes, do you have something like a locomotive there? Let me borrow it to work out my fists a bit. Inosuke raised his fist and made an unreasonable request. Work out your fists, that's a very good idea. Kyujiro nodded earnestly, but I don't have one. Upon hearing his answer, Zenitsu's motivation grew stronger. If we go to the Flame Hashira's place, we won't need to go on missions temporarily, and if we don't need to go on a mission, we won't need to hunt demons, and if we don't hunt demons, we won't encounter any danger, so I won't die. Zenitsu said with a torrent of momentum and struck a victorious pose on his own. Well said, young man. Kyujiro gave Zenitsu a thumbs up, saying with much appreciation. But that won't do, trying to escape missions at my place. You probably don't know how to write the word, Hashira, of the Flame Hashira. After thinking that way, Kyujiro had already figured out what kind of mission to assign to Zenitsu. And so, Rizel, Kyujiro, Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke, the group of 5, prepared to set off to the headquarters of the Demon Slayer Corps. Meanwhile, the other members of the Demon Slayer Corps stayed behind at the scene to clean up the aftermath. However, not a single person noticed that in a corner, a headless corpse, which had not instantly disintegrated to ash after being beheaded by a Nichiren's sword, lay silently, devoid of all vitality, suddenly moved its fingers. By the time one of the members of the Demon Slayer Corps came over, there was already nothing left. At the same time, within a luxurious mansion, a figure emitted a dark and dangerous aura. Sugikuni Yorichi, a man stood in front of a bookshelf, seemingly reading a book in his hand, muttering in a daze. Rip, asterisk. In the next moment, the book in his hand suddenly tore in half and shattered into pieces by some unknown power. Unaware of this, his hand holding the fragments of the book was trembling. It can't be, as the man murmured, veins bulged on his forehead. Absolutely impossible, Sugikuni Yorichi. That name awakened a certain unbearable past hidden deep in the man's heart, making him feel as if this body that had survived for 1,000 years was throbbing faintly as if some wound were acting up. At the same time, a slight fear in his heart was also awakened. He can't possibly still be alive. He's already dead, that's for sure. Otherwise, he wouldn't be here. If Yorichi were still alive, there would be no way for him to be active again. It was because he confirmed Yorichi's death that he appeared again in this world. Now, hundreds of years have passed, and that man, who was a genuine monster compared to himself, should have long been dead. Yet, why did that man suddenly appear again out of the blue? Is someone impersonating him? Lowering his head, the man in the study muttered in confusion. But the breathing style that beheaded Akaza, it's indeed Sun Breathing. Such swordsmanship, such strength, it was terrifying and powerful, just like Sugikuni Yorichi he knew. No, I must confirm who that human really is before I can be at ease. After making a decision, the man pressed his hand to his temple and called out 2 names. Hantengu, Gyoko, come to me quickly. After the call, a few seconds later, 2 voices echoed in his mind. Yes, Lord Muzan. Chapter 150, Hashira. According to Kyujiro, the headquarters of the Demon Slayer Corps was known as the Ubuyashiki Estate. Because the master of the Demon Slayer Corps was a descendant of a family called Ubuyashiki who had held this position for generations, the corps was also established by this family. As a result, the place where the master resided was the headquarters of the Demon Slayer Corps as well as the residence of the Ubuyashiki family. Due to the sensitive nature of the location, Rizel wasn't informed of its whereabouts on the way to the Ubuyashiki estate. Furthermore, he didn't have the opportunity to see the route. Instead, He sat with Kyujiro in a tightly sealed carriage and was transported to the destination without even glimpsing outside. As a result, when Riesel got off the carriage, he didn't even know where he was or what this place was. All he knew was that Kyujiro had brought him to a very secluded place and arrived at the courtyard of a large Japanese mansion. Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke did not accompany them but were arranged by Kyujiro to go to his own home. Only Riesel and Kyujiro came to this estate, and there wasn't even a servant responsible for guiding them. Riesel looked around and found the environment here was quite beautiful. Not only was the ground paved with stones, but there were also flowers and plants specially planted around, along with flowing water and small bridges. Undoubtedly, the style of the estate was Japanese, with a sense of historical weight and ancient feeling. Yup, we are here. Kyujiro, who brought Riesel to this place, patted his shoulder and then loudly announced toward the direction of the manor. Flame Hashira Rengoku Kyujiro and swordsman Sugikuni Yorichi is here. With Kyujiro's already loud voice, after deliberately shouting aloud, it turned into an echo, reverberating throughout the entire estate, persisting for a long time. Riesel quietly watched this scene and, at a certain moment, calmly lifted his head. Swish, 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 asterisk. In this split second, sky-splitting sounds resounded one after another as several figures flew from all directions to the courtyard. They landed on the walls surrounding the courtyard and looked down at Riesel standing in the center of the courtyard, emitting different but equally powerful auras. Seeing this scene, Kyujiro was somewhat astonished. Oh, you guys are here too. It was no wonder he would be surprised. As the deliberately hidden headquarters of the Demon Slayer Corps, the Ubuyashiki estate was rarely visited by people on ordinary days. Even the Hashira rarely gathered here at the same time. Only during the semi-annual Hashira meeting did they gather together to discuss the overall management of the Demon Slayer Corps and future action plans. Normally, the Hashira were busy with their respective missions, not only responsible for guarding vast areas and collecting information related to demons but also training to improve their own strength, coupled with various other tasks. Under normal circumstances, the Hashira would not gather at the headquarters. After all, the semi-annual Hashira meeting had ended recently, so logically, they should have been out completing missions or dealing with the tasks of the Demon Slayer Corps. Yet, at this moment, rare as it was, all the Hashira, seldom seen on ordinary days, had gathered together once again. You finally made it back, Rengoku. A petite girl standing on the courtyard walls closest to Kyujiro greeted him. She had dark purple curly hair with bangs that ended in purple eyes, and wore a Demon Slayer Corps uniform with a haori draped over it patterned with butterfly wings, giving her the appearance of a butterfly ready to take flight, exceptionally beautiful. She was Kocho Shinobu, the insect Hashira. Hey there, Rengoku, heard you made quite a show on the Mugen train, not bad. A young man standing straight with arms crossed, perched on a tree branch like a ninja, remarked with a smile. He was a muscular young man wearing a sleeveless Demon Slayer Corps uniform with a jeweled forehead protector and silver chain-like ornament hanging from each side of the headpiece. His silver-white hair was tied into a prominent ponytail, and he carried two swords on his back, exuding a strong aura. He was Uzui Tengen, the Sound Hashira. So sorry, Mr. Rengoku, because everyone was curious about what the person who defeated the upper rank looked like. A shy-looking girl standing modestly in the courtyard spoke guiltily. She had large light green eyes, rosy cheeks, a mole under each eye, and 3 grass green and cherry blossom-colored braids cascading down her back. She wore a white haori over a specially modified Demon Slayer Corps uniform, with a short skirt and green striped stockings, quite fashionable. She was Kanroji Mitsuri, the Love Hashira. And then, is that boy the one who defeated the upper rank? A young man with a white hedgehog-like head, 3 scars on his face, and a terrifying appearance covered in scars that exuded a vicious aura asked with a somewhat irritated expression. He wore a white haori with the character, Kill, on it, his uniform open to reveal muscles, emanating a terrifying vibe, as if he could draw his sword at any moment and strike someone down. He was Shinazugawa Sanemi, the Wind Hashira. He killed an upper rank. Unbelievable. A young man lurking in a darker corner chimed in. He had heterochromatic eyes, one green and one gold, the lower half of his face wrapped in bandages, and black medium-length hair curled like seaweed. He wore a black and white striped haori, with a white snake coiled around his neck, hissing at Rizel. He was Iguro Obanai, the serpent Hashira. Ah, so young, looks only a bit older than Tokito. To fight with an upper rank at such a young age, it's too pitiful, Nemu Amida Butsu. A large man dressed as a monk and the most muscular among the rest, remarked. With hands clasped together and tears streaming down his face, he had a long scar on his forehead and seemed to be completely blind. He wore an olive green robe over his Demon Slayer Corps uniform, with a string of prayer beads in his hands, giving the impression of a monk to those who didn't know him. He was Himahima Gyume, the stone Hashira. At this moment, two people suddenly leapt down from the walls into the courtyard and stood silently, not uttering a word. Between these two, one appeared calm and composed, seldom smiling or speaking unnecessarily. He had black hair and wore a Demon Slayer Corps uniform with a haori draped over it. The patterns on its left and right sides differed. On the other hand, the second one had long black hair, the tips tinged with a minty green hue, and his expression was blank and indifferent. He wore a dark, slightly turquoise-tinted Demon Slayer Corps uniform that resembled more of a kimono than the standard cuffed uniform. They were the Water Hashira, Tomioka Giyu, and the Mist Hashira, Tokito Muichiro. All of you really came. Good, this calls for a celebration. With Kyujiro's loud proclamation, every Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps gathered here, a rare occurrence outside their official meetings. Rizel's gaze swept over these newcomers one by one, identifying their identities. Every Hashira also observed him, some with curiosity in their eyes, others with suspicion. For example, Wind Hashira Shinazugawa Sanemi and Serpent Hashira Iguro Obanai didn't hide their suspicions. I say, Rengoku, you didn't send Kasugai Crow back with fake information, did you? Sanemi said impolitely. Can this boy really kill an upper rank? I don't buy it. Agreed. Obanai nodded, twirling the white snake around his neck with a gloomy expression. Upper ranks that haven't had member changes in over 100 years, even we wouldn't dare claim we could behead one of them. Now, out of the blue, a young swordsman we've never heard of claims he succeeded in killing one. Unfortunately, I don't buy it either. You two must have teamed up, right? Tengen pressed his forehead, striking a bizarre pose. Although not flamboyant, in terms of results, this makes it easier for people to accept. Ah, indeed, Gyume said, clasping his hands, tears welling up. Killing an upper rank, even if it was teamwork, is still a great achievement. Wind Hashira, Serpent Hashira, Sound Hashira, and Stone Hashira expressed their opinions one after another, seemingly doubting the accuracy of the information. Don't say that, everyone. Perhaps Sugikuni Yorichi is a genius like Tokito. Mitsuri intervened, tapping her fingers while speaking up for Rizel. However, after speaking like that, she stole a glance at him, then secretly squealed in her mind. Sugikuni looks so handsome. He does seem smart and talented. Shinobu, who had been eyeing Rizel since his entrance, said with a smile before turning to Muichiro. What do you think, Tokito? I don't care. Muichiro seemed uninterested in the topic. As for the Water Hashira, Tomioka Giyu, he hadn't spoken a word from beginning to end, standing silently, apparently not one for conversation. Eventually, Kyujiro spoke up. I've already reported everything truthfully through Kasugai Crow. Every word is true, not a single lie. If there's any deception, I'm willing to commit seppuku. Although the Flame Hashira went so far as to say that, even so, some Hashira were still reluctant to believe it. If it's true, we'll know if we try it out, right? Sanemi smirked menacingly and, in front of everyone, drew the sword on his waist. Shinazugawa, what do you want to do? Kyujiro shouted in surprise, his eyes widened. TCH, don't fuss. I just want to test the waters, so it shouldn't matter, right? Sanemi sneered. Anyway, he's not even a member of the Corps, so it wouldn't be against the rules to lay a hand on him, no. In the next moment, Sanemi turned his head to Rizel. Boy, you dare to take a swing at me. Soon, a whirlwind stirred around Sanemi's body, disturbing the air in the courtyard. Chapter 151. Wipe the floor. In the serene and tranquil courtyard, the surroundings suddenly transformed as if a hurricane had swept through, causing the flowers, plants, and trees to sway, the water under a small bridge to ripple, and the entire cozy ambiance to take on a hint of danger. As Sanemi raised his Nichiren sword and pointed it at Rizel, the swirling wind around him went berserk, louder and more forceful than when Rizel used Aerial, causing the stones scattered on the ground to roll one after another. Every Hashira watched Sanemi in this state, mostly indifferent except for Kyujiro. Clearly, Sanemi's provocation intrigued them, and they were eager to see the outcome. "Hey, aren't you going to draw your sword?" Sanemi shouted impatiently. However, Rizel just calmly looked at him, appearing completely defenseless, not even a shadow of a weapon visible on him. Seeing this, veins bulged on Sanemi's forehead, anger evident on his face as if he felt insulted. "Since you won't draw your sword, then don't blame me if you die." With those words, Sanemi finally moved. Boom! A sudden gust of wind rose, and like a tornado, the wind Hashira charged toward Rizel. "Stop, Shinazugawa," Kyujiro exclaimed hastily. He couldn't just stand by and watch his friend being attacked by his own comrade. However, as he was about to rush forward, he was suddenly held back by someone. "You stay here and watch, Rengoku." Obanai appeared behind Kyujiro, one hand on his shoulder, stopping him. As Obanai held Kyujiro back, the tornado-like gust already reached Rizel, sending his kimono fluttering wildly. Sanemi, in the tornado, clearly showed no mercy as his Nichiren sword violently cut through the air, aiming squarely at Rizel's chest. His attack was undeniably powerful, not inferior to Kyujiro's. Instead, it was even faster, seemingly capable of slicing through the entire courtyard. With just this one attack, it was evident that Wind Hashira Shinazugawa Sanemi was no less powerful than Flame Hashira Rengoku Kyujiro. However, ding! As the sound of a clear, bell-like tone resounded, Sanemi's slash halted, his sword froze mid-air, and the howling wind dissipated. Sanemi appeared in front of Rizel, devoid of any momentum. What? Sanemi's complexion suddenly changed. Impossible. Seeing this, the other Hashira were equally shocked, unable to believe their eyes. Rizel stood calmly, his kimono finally settling down after being ruffled by the wind. He was unscathed, not even flinching, just extending a hand in Sanemi's direction. However, firmly gripped between Rizel's two fingers was a blade. It was the blade of Sanemi's sword. "You bastard!" Sanemi shouted, his eyes filled with disbelief. "He actually stopped my slash with just 2 fingers. Are you fucking kidding me?" Satisfied, Rizel finally spoke, his expression still calm. "Though I don't think I need to prove anything to you lot, being bothered by you troublemakers is quite annoying. Consider this as a favor returned." Rizel continued calmly, releasing his fingers from Sanemi's sword. Bang! The next moment, with a thunderous explosion, Sanemi was kicked away. With a speed that caught everyone off guard, Rizel kicked Sanemi like a flash, causing the Wind Hashira to fly out even faster than when he charged at Rizel, crashing into a rock in the courtyard, shattering it. Shinazugawa. Many Hashira who witnessed this scene cried out in shock. Some even directly attacked Rizel. Swish! Swish! 2 figures simultaneously cut through the air, appearing on Rizel's left and right. Sound breathing. First form. Roar. Tengen drew 2 swords from his back, his muscular arms bulging with immense strength, before bringing down 2 crimson-hilted swords, creating a tremendous roar with astonishing power. Serpent breathing. First form. Winding serpent slash. Obanai twisted his body in midair, contorting at an unbelievable angle, holding a curved serpent-shaped and double-edged sword. As he twisted and swung, it seemed like a living snake, slashing out a serpent-shaped slash from the side toward Rizel. As the 2 Hashira launched their attacks simultaneously, both in terms of momentum and aura, they were truly world-shaking. Tengen and Obanai were like 2 contrasting individuals, one attacking in a flashy manner, the other in a stealthy manner, directly blocking all of Rizel's retreat paths. However, Rizel's response left everyone dumbfounded. He stood there motionless, just flicking the sleeve of his kimono. Whoosh! With just that flick, it stirred up tremendous gusts of wind and impact, sending both Hashira flying with a loud howl. In the next instant, Rizel flipped his hand, grabbed 2 small stones blown over by the gust of wind in front of him, and with a flick of his fingers, launched the stones like bullets. Bang! Bang! Accompanied by two muffled sounds, the stone bullets hit the chests of the flying Tengen and Obanai, causing them to fall to the ground in pain. In an instant, the entire courtyard suddenly fell silent. Every Hashira looked at Tengen and Obanai writhing on the ground in pain, then at Sanemi struggling amidst the rubble, speechless. He beat 3 Hashira so easily. Mitsuri couldn't help but cover her mouth in shock. Amitabha. Gyume clasped his hands together in prayer, tears no longer streaming down his face. Shinobu glanced deeply at Rizel, her smile unchanged. Even Geiyu and Muichiro, who had been silently observing from the sidelines, felt a shiver down their spines, their gaze filled with solemnity as they looked at Rizel. Only Kyujiro, as he stopped his movements, let out a sigh. I couldn't stop them after all. Indeed, he knew from the beginning that the outcome would turn out like this. He wasn't kidding. He had seen with his own eyes Rizel's strength and how he faced off against the upper 3, Akaza. How could he not know where Rizel's strength lies? When facing Akaza, he could distinctly feel he wasn't Akaza's match at all. No doubt, Akaza was stronger than him, or rather, Akaza was stronger than every Hashira currently, and this was something he could confirm without a doubt. However, even with such strength, Akaza was defeated with just 1 slash from Rizel. In such a case, according to logic, if he faced off against Rizel, he wouldn't be able to withstand even 1 slash from Rizel at all. Among the current Hashira, except for one person who made Kyujiro feel distinctly inferior, the rest of the Hashira were at best on par with him, and some of them were clearly weaker. Wind Hashira Shinazugawa Sanemi, Serpent Hashira Iguro Obanai, and Sound Hashira Uzui Tengen, while their strengths were not weak and were among the top-ranking Hashira, individually, Kyujiro didn't think he was weaker than any of them. According to this fact, even if those 3 teamed up, how could they possibly deal with Rizel? At most, Rizel would just turn 1 slash into 3 slash. Kyujiro wanted to stop them, not only because he didn't want to see Rizel being harassed by the Hashira but also because he didn't want them to embarrass themselves further. Unfortunately, he couldn't do it. In the end, this was their own fault. Of course, the 3 Hashira who had fallen to such humiliation were definitely not willing to give up. You bastard, this isn't pleasant at all. Tch. Sanemi, Tengen, and Obanai stood up successively, glaring angrily at Rizel. Responding to their glares, Rizel simply stated calmly. Just give up. You can't possibly match me without using the mark, the bright red Nichiren sword, and the transparent world. His words stunned every Hashira. Mark, bright red Nichiren sword, transparent world. Every Hashira furrowed their brows tightly, looking at each other in blank dismay, seemingly ignorant of what Rizel was talking about. Rizel didn't explain either, merely turning his gaze toward the mansion. You've also seen enough, can you come out now? With Rizel's words, every Hashira quickly brushed aside what he had just said. One after another, they looked toward the direction of the mansion, seemingly realizing something. Soon, a voice came from inside. I'm sorry, I meant no harm. I just wanted to see what the legendary sun breathing was like, but unfortunately, couldn't fulfill my wish. Strangely, the voice gave a light and airy feeling, calm and gentle, making one feel refreshed. As the voice echoed, a man supported by someone emerged from the mansion and stepped onto the veranda leading to the courtyard. Master. Seeing this man, all the Hashira present, whether it was the previously arrogant Wind Hashira and Serpent Hashira, or the silent Water Hashira and Mist Hashira, all kneeled on one knee, bowing their heads. Without a doubt, this was the highest courtesy and the utmost respect. Rizel became the only one standing in the courtyard, only his eyes showing a slight tremor as he stared at the man. No choice. After all, the appearance of this man was truly out of the ordinary. Dressed appropriately, elegant and noble in posture, one could tell he was someone of high status, and also a benevolent one. Yet, despite being such a benevolent leader, the upper part of his face was severely disfigured, his eyes seemed to have already lost sight, and there was a sense of illness emanating from his body, making him look extremely frail. With just one glance, Rizel could see it. This man, his time was running out. Chapter 152, The Origin of Breathing Style. Ubuyashiki Kagaya. That was the name of the man who appeared before Rizel. He was the head of the Ubuyashiki family as well as the 97th generation leader of the Demon Slayer Corps. Every member of the Demon Slayer Corps, whether they were the Hashira or ordinary members, held deep reverence and respect for their leader, as evidenced by how they addressed him as Master. Now, this leader was being supported by his wife and daughters, walking out of the mansion together, to a place where the sunlight could reach, standing opposite Rizal. "Welcome to the headquarters of the Demon Slayer Corps, Sugikuni Yorichi." Kagaya greeted Rizal with a gentle tone and a serene expression. "I apologize for not being able to bow. As you can see, I am seriously ill and cannot make too many vigorous movements. Just walking out of the house like this has already drained most of my strength. I hope you can understand." Although his voice was gentle, it carried a strong charisma, making people involuntarily feel a sense of trust toward him. Even Rizal, when facing him, couldn't help but slightly relax his usually calm expression. "No need to be polite, Lord Ubuyashiki." Rizal shook his head. "I may have been invited, but I am just an ordinary guest, so don't bother with formality." In this world, the Ubuyashiki family was an ancient family with a history of over 1,000 years, extending from the Heian period to the present day, holding significant influence throughout the country. This could be seen from the fact that they were able to establish a large organization like the Demon Slayer Corps without government support and have managed it almost single-handedly until this day. Moreover, Rizal recalled from the original work that the salaries in the Demon Slayer Corps were quite generous. Even the lowest rank Mizunodo could receive a monthly salary equivalent to about 200,000 yen in 2019, not to mention the salary of a Hashira. Furthermore, all these salaries were paid by the Ubuyashiki family, along with expenses such as the treatment of injured members, post-demon battle cleanup, and expenses during mission execution, all of which were borne solely by this family. Such a family undoubtedly possesses vast financial resources. Otherwise, it would be impossible to independently manage a big organization like Demon Slayer Corps for nearly 1,000 years. Naturally, as the head of the Ubuyashiki family and the leader of the Demon Slayer Corps, Kagaya's status was extremely prestigious. In comparison, Rizal was just an ordinary young man and really didn't need any grand gestures. That being said, you are neither a member of the Demon Slayer Corps nor obligated to eradicate demons, yet you helped us defeat the upper three of the 12 Kazuki. For this alone, we are deeply grateful. Kagaya spoke softly to Rizal and shook his head slightly. Members of the upper ranks haven't changed for over 100 years, which means that in all that time, no one has ever defeated an upper rank. On the contrary, we have lost countless Hashira to them. As Kagaya's voice turned melancholic, it carried a tinge of sorrow. It was a sorrow for the once sacrificial victim. Every Hashira also hung their heads, their eyes clouded with gloom. 12 Kazuki, an organization composed of the highest and most powerful demons, had always been the bane of the Demon Slayer Corps, a constant thorn in their side. Many Hashira had hunted lower ranks before, however, many had also perished at the hands of upper ranks. Both the Demon Slayer Corps and the 12 Kazuki were truly sworn enemies. Once casualties occurred among the lower ranks of the 12 Kazuki, they almost always fell to the Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps. Likewise, if casualties occurred among the Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps, they almost always fell to the upper ranks of the 12 Kazuki. They were nemesis locked in a cycle of mutual hunting, with the Hashira gaining fame by hunting lower ranks, and upper ranks earning their greatest merits by hunting the Hashira. From Rizal's perspective, this was quite ironic. After experiencing the event of the Mugen Train and successfully hunting both a lower rank and an upper rank, Rizal had roughly gauged the strength of demons and demon slayers. Beginning with the weakest, a demon newly transformed, possessing diluted demon's blood, and not yet mastering the blood demon art, was roughly equivalent to a level 1 adventurer. They were stronger than ordinary humans but not entirely invincible against them. Those who had mastered the blood demon art, consumed humans, and gained some experience and strength were roughly equivalent to level 2. Lower ranks were roughly equivalent to level 3. The Hashira and the upper ranks were roughly equivalent to level 4. However, the upper ranks generally surpassed the Hashira. If they had to be classified, most of the Hashira were akin to lower level 4, while the upper ranks were at least upper level 4. Moreover, demons were naturally unafraid of death. Whether their limbs were severed or their bodies pierced, as long as their heads weren't cut off by Nichiren's swords, they could immediately regenerate. With this advantage alone, they naturally held a significant edge over the Hashira when facing them. Therefore, once someone in the Demon Slayer Corps reached the strength of a Hashira, they could easily slay lower ranks, earn merit, and become a Hashira. However, when facing the upper ranks, the Hashira often found themselves lacking in strength and were ultimately hunted down by them. This led to the basic fact that the successive generations of Hashira had almost all perished at the hands of the upper ranks, leading to their deep hatred toward the upper ranks. In fact, this was also the reason why the reaction of the Hashira was so big upon learning that Rizal had slain an upper rank. On the other hand, since members of the 12 Kazuki only met their demise at the hands of the Hashira, the upper ranks regarded them as enemies to be eliminated at all costs. Once confronted, they would never let the Hashira go. Now, with Rizal having slain an upper rank for the Demon Slayer Corps, causing an absence in the upper ranks, which hadn't occurred in over 100 years, this undoubtedly marked a monumental achievement for the Corps. Plus, with the sun breathing re-emerging from you, I can already sense it. In our generation, demon slayers and demons may finally settle the score, putting an end to this millennia-old history of mistakes. Kagaya's voice became somewhat energized as he spoke. Cough, cough, asterisk. However, due to the shift in his emotions, he suddenly started coughing violently. Master, please take care of yourself. Every Hashira was shocked one after another, speaking hastily as they saw Kagaya's wife and daughters supporting him by patting his chest and back to ease his discomfort. Don't worry, I'm fine. I'm just overwhelmed with happiness. Kagaya reassured his wife and daughters, patting their hands, then gestured for everyone to relax before turning to Rizal with a smile. You truly live up to the name, Sugikuni Yorichi. Perhaps it's fate. Hearing Kagaya's words, Rizal raised an eyebrow. You know Sugikuni Yorichi? Of course, Kagaya replied, looking deeply at Rizal's eyes. Sugikuni Yorichi, a swordsman born in the Sengoku era, was the first to master and create the breathing style. The Corps began practicing the breathing style under his guidance, giving us the ability to fight demons. However, the breathing style he created and used was said to be so powerful that it demanded strict requirements of the user's body, making it nearly impossible for anyone to learn it. As a result, various breathing styles were derived from the one he used. Kagaya glanced at every Hashira kneeling in the courtyard as his voice slowly spread out. Water breathing, thunder breathing, flame breathing, stone breathing, wind breathing, these are the 5 fundamental breathing styles. They are branches derived from Sugikuni Yorichi's breathing style. After the emergence of these 5 fundamental breathing styles, the Corps witnessed the rise of many talented individuals who developed derivative styles based on them. Love breathing used by Love Hashira Kanroji Mitsuri is a derivative branch of flame breathing. Insect breathing used by Insect Hashira Kocho Shinobu and Serpent breathing used by Serpent Hashira Iguro Obanai are derivative branches of water breathing. Sound breathing used by Sound Hashira Uzui Tengen is a derivative branch of thunder breathing. Mist breathing used by Mist Hashira Tokito Muichiro is a derivative branch of wind breathing. In this way, various breathing styles emerged successively, but the breathing style of Sugikuni Yorichi, which served as the origin of all these breathing styles, has been lost. As Kagaya spoke, a rich smile appeared on his face involuntarily. Until my generation, the origin of all breathing styles, the ancestor and foundation of them all, has finally been revived in the world once again. Upon hearing that, everyone couldn't help but wonder what Kagaya meant. Could it be the sun breathing this boy used as the breathing style master was talking about? Sanemi couldn't help but speak up in shock. Upon hearing him, the other Hashira cast astonished looks at Rizal one after another, surprised by this sudden revelation. Master, Kyujiro exclaimed surprisedly, why were we not informed of such an important matter? Indeed, whether it was sun breathing or Sugikuni Yorichi, hardly any Hashira present knew of their existence. This was very absurd. Sun breathing was the origin and foundation of all breathing styles, the strongest breathing style, while Sugikuni Yorichi was the one who created this breathing style, bringing it to the world. Why were such important matters devoid of any records or tales within the Demon Slayer Corps? The reason is simple. Rizal spoke up, answering Kyujiro's question. Because Sugikuni Yorichi once made some mistakes and got banished from the Corps. On top of that, the legacy and records about sun breathing were brutally destroyed. That's why there are hardly any records about these two within the Corps. Riesel's explanation shook everyone. That's right. Kagaya sighed resignedly and lowered his head. I must say, it's a very tragic situation. Chapter 153, Collecting Breathing Styles. In Riesel's eyes, Sugikuni Yorichi was undoubtedly the most powerful being in this world. It was not just because he created the first ever breathing style and introduced it to the world, but also because his talent was simply inhuman. He inherently understood the principles of breathing style, with sun breathing being the result of organizing these principles. He even came with a cheat from birth, not only having the Demon Slayer mark on his forehead that greatly enhanced his physical abilities but also reaching the so-called highest domain, selfless state, mentioned by Akaza, demonstrating extraordinary strength from childhood. He also had a history of nearly exterminating the Demon King, who had survived for a millennium, leaving him with psychological trauma. The Demon King was so traumatized that he refused to show himself to the world again until Yorichi's dying day. All these feats made Riesel genuinely believe that Yorichi, the swordsman born in the Sengoku period, was the strongest existence in this world. Unfortunately, at the moment when he was most likely to resolve everything and end the tragedy that had spanned 1,000 years, he failed. With this failure, Yorichi, who was born overpowered, fell from grace. Not only was he banished from the Demon Slayer Corps, but he also carried a lifelong regret that he could never let go of. Moreover, it was also because of him that the Corps faced numerous major crises of destruction. Fearing Yorichi and his sun breathing, the Demon King launched a pursuit against anyone who knew about sun breathing after surviving the crisis brought by this overpowered swordsman, nearly destroying the Demon Slayer Corps several times. As a result, the records of Yorichi and sun breathing were lost, with only the Ubuyashiki family, who had always led the Demon Slayer Corps, retaining some records. However, at this moment, Kagaya suddenly mentioned something else. If I'm not wrong, the Rengoku family should have more or less kept some relevant records. As Kagaya suddenly brought up Kyujiro's family, every Hashira turned their attention to Kyujiro. My family. Kyujiro was also somewhat perplexed. Yes, Kagaya nodded. As you know, the Flame Hashira has almost always been from your family, making it a long-standing family of demon slayers. In the beginning, it was your family's ancestor who encountered Sugikuni Yorichi and introduced him to the Corps, shaping it into what it is today. Even after being banished from the Corps, he still maintained contact with your family. Based on this, your family should have records similar to mine. The evidence lies in the fact that your family's flame-breathing style is the closest and most identical to sun-breathing among all breathing styles. Sun-breathing and flame-breathing were indeed very identical, breathing styles that manipulated flames and experts in flame manipulation. However, sun-breathing wasn't just about flames, it harnessed the power of the sun. From this perspective, flame breathing could perhaps be considered a lower version of sun breathing. Of course, since the 5 fundamental breathing styles were all derived from sun breathing, they could be seen as lower versions as well. As for sound breathing, serpent breathing, mist breathing, love breathing, and insect breathing, since they were derived and modified versions from the 5 fundamental breathing styles, they should be the lowest. The ones who could really make them shine were probably only the current Hashira. Kyujiro, you aren't very fond of exploring your family history, are you? Your free time is spent studying swordsmanship, so that's why you're not familiar with it. Kagaya said with a smile. Your father should know more about these. If you're interested, you can go back and ask him. Upon hearing that, Kyujiro fell silent. Nevertheless, the strongest breathing style is re-emerging again, and that's a good thing. Kagaya turned to every Hashira. You should not disrespect the swordsman who inherits the great ancestor's name and swordsmanship too much, understood? Yes, every Hashira bowed their heads and remained silent for a moment before answering. Even the most unruly Tsunemi and Obanai refrained from speaking out against Kagaya. However, what they truly thought in their hearts, only they themselves knew. As Riesel watched all this, his appreciation for Kagaya couldn't help but grow even more. Not because Kagaya spoke up for him, but because, after explaining the situation, Kagaya had no intention of pursuing the matter regarding his origin. Such as why Rizal could use the long-lost sun breathing. Or why did he know about Sugikuni Yorichi's existence and even use his name? Kagaya didn't ask any of those questions and didn't even inquire about Rizal's origin or purpose. Frankly, allowing Rizal to come here to meet him face to face was in itself an expression of trust. Just this alone was enough to make Rizal have a much better impression of him. Sugikuni Yorichi, would you like to join the Demon Slayer Corps? Kagaya asked politely. His question made all the Hashira present look at Rizal. Although some of them weren't quite fond of Rizal, at least his strength was recognized by them. Being able to effortlessly defeat 3 Hashira, his strength was beyond doubt, proving that his feat of slaying an upper rank was no mere boast. On top of that, Rizal also possessed knowledge of the strongest breathing style. If he could remain in the Demon Slayer Corps, the corp's strength would undoubtedly become unprecedentedly powerful. Moreover, if he could pass down sun breathing, that would be even better. Unfortunately, Rizal did not agree. To be honest, I wasn't really keen on joining the Demon Slayer Corps. Rizal answered calmly, I might need some time to learn some secret techniques and train in seclusion. If I stay in the Corps, I doubt I'll have time for that. In all honesty, he wasn't entirely opposed to joining the Demon Slayer Corps. Joining the Corps would allow him to utilize their intelligence network to find out where demons were to be hunted, thus obtaining Excelia. Unfortunately, as he had suspected before the dimensional travel, demons in this world weren't plentiful enough to warrant a killing spree. Each demon hunt involved a considerable journey to various towns, taking up a significant amount of time, and usually resulted in only 1 or so demons being slain, making the efficiency of obtaining Excelia quite low. It would be a different story if these demons were powerful. After all, the stronger the enemy, the more Excelia one could gain. If his opponent was powerful enough, all the effort he put into hunting them down wouldn't be a waste of time. However, the problem was that he had already figured out that even the upper ranks were only equivalent to level 4 adventurers at best, and at his current level, killing such creatures wouldn't yield much Excelia. Unless the Demon King himself showed up or the strongest upper one among the upper ranks made a move, he wouldn't be interested. As far as he knew, the strength of those 2 surpassed all the demons in the 12 Kazuki, possibly even reaching level 5. Especially the Demon King. If there was anyone in this world who could be his opponent, it might only be this Demon King. If he encountered these 2 strongest demons, he would be interested in taking action, whereas for the rest of the demons, he felt that instead of coveting that little bit of Excelia, it would be better to stick to his original plan and collect the breathing styles of this world to see if he could realize his idea. If he could succeed, then this dimensional travel wouldn't have been in vain. Considering all of those factors, Rizal abandoned the idea of joining the Demon Slayer Corps. Once he joined, he knew they wouldn't let him train leisurely, they would surely assign him numerous missions to hunt demons. Because of this, Rizal politely declined Kagaya's invitation. However, Kagaya didn't seem disappointed, and instead, he became quite interested in Rizal's reason. Learning secret techniques and training in seclusion, is it? Kagaya chuckled gently. Is there anything I can help you with? Can you? Rizal asked in surprise. Yes, I will help if I can. Kagaya nodded gently. Even if you don't join the Corps, as long as there are people in this world who can kill demons, threaten the upper ranks, or even threaten the progenitor of demons himself, it's meaningful to us. As that's so, Rizal looked deeply into Kagaya's eyes before asking a question. What if I want to learn your corpse breathing style? His question caught Kagaya and every Hashira off guard, but in the next second, Kagaya nodded without hesitation. If it helps you, then naturally, there's no problem. Kagaya agreed readily with a smile. In fact, the knowledge of breathing styles wasn't really a tightly guarded secret, as the Demon Slayer Corps had appointed several members to teach breathing styles to outsiders, thereby adding fresh blood to the Corps. Generally speaking, as long as there was an intention and desire, the Demon Slayer Corps welcomed anyone interested in learning breathing styles. What breathing style do you need? Kagaya asked. Wind, flame, water, stone, thunder, these 5 fundamental breathing styles, I probably need them all. Rizal answered, then thought for a moment before continuing his words. As for the other derived breathing styles, I'm not sure if they'll be useful. We'll see when the need arises. His words instantly offended quite a few people. HMPH, just so you know, my sound breathing is quite magnificent. Tengen snorted irritatedly. Is he looking down on our breathing styles? Obanai was displeased. Oh my, being underestimated. Shinobu remarked with a gentle smile. I'm really sorry if mine can't be of use. Mitsuri pouted. Quote. Muichiro remained silent as if lost in thought. Kyujiro. Kagaya turned his head to Kyujiro. Let Sugikuni stay in your place for the time being, remember to entertain him well. Yes, master. Kyujiro instantly agreed and had no objections. All right then, let's call it a day. Kagaya nodded with a gentle smile. I hope to see all of you gathered here again next time, don't be absent. Yes, all the Hashira answered in unison and bowed their heads in respect. Chapter 154, Exclusive Nichiren Sword. Eventually, under the invitation of Kyujiro, Rizel moved into the residence of the Rengoku family. As a family of demon slayers for generations, the residence of the Rengoku family was kept strictly confidential. Since they had earned the trust of the Ubuyashiki family, their connection with the Demon Slayer Corps was strong enough to withstand scrutiny. Consequently, their residence was not very far from the Ubuyashiki estate, one could even say it was in the same town. Rizel couldn't help but suspect that this town was specifically established for the Demon Slayer Corps and those closely related to them. Several Hashira had also moved to this town after retirement, though he wasn't sure where they had gone. It seemed plausible that they had established residences here. If that were indeed the case, the financial resources of the Ubuyashiki family might surpass even his imagination, to create a whole town for residency, showcasing their immense wealth. The Rengoku family was equally impressive, boasting a rich history, though not on par with the Ubuyashiki family, it was far greater than an average family. After settling in, Rizel received a brief tour from Kyujiro. My father and little brother also live here, but my father is currently semi-retired, and my little brother isn't a demon slayer yet, so I won't introduce them to you for now. Just relax and make yourself at home. If you want to practice, the courtyard is spacious enough. After the tour, Kyujiro assigned a room to Rizel. During this time, Rizel also encountered the three main characters, but they seemed to be engaged in some inexplicable training fervor. Ha ha ha, let's settle this, Lord of the Land. Inosuke excitedly chased after a humanoid locomotive figure in the courtyard. For fuck's sake, why do I have to be the Lord of the Land? Zenitsu, clad in a locomotive-shaped costume, yelled furiously while evading Inosuke's pursuit. 334, 335, 336, 337. Meanwhile, Tanjiro was doing push-ups, seemingly focused on enhancing his stamina, while a wooden box rested on his back as a weight. The three of them were making a ruckus in the courtyard, which amused both Rizel and Kyujiro, who watched for quite some time. Quote. Should we not disturb them? Rizel suggested. Agreed, Kyujiro replied with a serious expression. And thus, Rizel temporarily settled in the Rengoku residence. At the same time, the Ubuyashiki family acted swiftly, showing considerable importance to Rizel's request by sending over what he had asked for the very next day. Here you go, 5 books of fundamental breathing styles. Kyujiro said with a smile as he handed over 5 books to Rizel. Even though the 5 books were not thick, each of moderate thickness, they formed the foundation of the Demon Slayer Corps. The covers of the books were color-coded according to their respective breathing styles. Flame breathing was red, water breathing was blue, stone breathing was gray, wind breathing was green, thunder breathing was golden. 5 books with different colored covers were neatly arranged in front of Rizel, presenting an impressive sight. These 5 books are specially curated and updated to the latest editions, packed with insights from different experts. For example, flame breathing includes knowledge and explanations passed down from generations of flame Hashira in my family. Kyujiro grinned widely at Rizel. Though we can't arrange for those experts in other breathing styles to provide face-to-face guidance to you, if it's flame breathing, feel free to ask me anything if you're unclear. A direct guidance from the flame Hashira himself, undoubtedly an invaluable opportunity for any average swordsman. Alright, thanks. Rizel didn't refuse outright, simply agreeing. Is there anything else I can do for you? Kyujiro exclaimed. Master has already instructed me to fulfill all your requests as much as possible. Upon hearing that, Riesel pondered for a moment before making another request. Could you prepare scarlet crimson iron sand and scarlet ore for me? Naturally, he was referring to the metallic minerals used to forge Nichiren swords. Oh, Kyujiro's eyes gleamed. You need a Nichiren sword. I might. Riesel chuckled and shrugged his shoulders. After all, I don't have one yet, and using sun breathing with a Nichiren sword seems to be a better match. In this world, swords and katana were essentially the same weapons, otherwise, breathing style wouldn't be referred to as swordsmanship. The difference between Nichiren swords and the ones Riesel usually wielded was that the former had only one sharp edge, while the latter had two. Additionally, the blade of Nichiren swords was curved, suitable for heavy slashes, while the latter's blade was straight, allowing for more flexibility. Both could be used for performing breathing styles, but they had their differences. Even though all of Sun Breathing's forms were supposed to be performed with a Nichiren sword, if Riesel wanted to use different types of swords to perform it, he probably had to make some adjustments. However, he didn't have any plan in that regard at the moment, since he simply thought that if he had a Nichiren sword, it would at least be pretty useful when dealing with demons. Without it, he would have to rely on decomposition magic to kill demons. However, since he decided to focus on studying breathing styles, he decided to temporarily refrain from using magic. In that case, acquiring a Nichiren sword was indeed necessary. Shall we take charge of forging your Nichiren sword? Kyujiro asked, brimming with enthusiasm. You know, the Corps has expert swordsmiths who work in secret, and their craftsmanship is excellent. They'll surely forge a Nichiren sword that satisfies you. He was not boasting. The Demon Slayer Corps indeed had a close collaboration with a group of swordsmiths who resided in Swordsmith Village. Almost all of them were swordsmiths, responsible not only for forging and maintaining all Nichiren swords of demon slayers but also deeply passionate and dedicated to swordsmithing. Generation after generation, they researched and forged Nichiren swords, continuously improving their craftsmanship year by year. They were undoubtedly the elites of the swordsmithing industry. Not only did each demon slayer have a dedicated swordsmith to forge their Nichiren sword, but to prevent demon attacks, the location of Swordsmith Village was highly secretive, with hardly anyone in the Corps knowing its exact whereabouts. Even entering the village required blindfolds and nose plugs, with several people specially designated to escort and guide, with the guidance of Kasugai crows. Moreover, the order of the route, the guiding Kasugai crow, and the escorting people changed frequently, ensuring the utmost secrecy, comparable to the Ubuyashiki estate, the headquarters of the Demon Slayer Corps. It could be said that in this world, no smith was more skilled at forging Nichiren swords than swordsmiths from Swordsmith Village. Even the swords of the Hashira were forged there, which was why Kyujiro was so proud and eager to recommend them. Unfortunately, Riesel had no intention of having swordsmiths from Swordsmith Village forge his sword. Just get those two materials ready for me and I'll handle the rest. I've got my own plans. Riesel answered calmly. Indeed, there was no denying that in this world, Nichiren swords were considered a particularly special weapon. However, it was a different story in other worlds. Whether it was in terms of hardness, power, sharpness, or even endurance, Nichiren swords could only be considered an ordinary weapon, far from meeting the standards of special equipment in the world of Danmachi. In other words, Nichiren swords couldn't even be classified as third-class equipment, just a relatively outstanding weapon among ordinary equipment. It could inflict damage on demons, not due to the sword's performance, but because of the properties of the forging materials. Capable of emitting energy similar to sunlight, it had a significant effect on demons, but it was utterly useless against anything other than demons. Such a weapon was naturally not suitable for Riesel. Even without using Ariel, with his current strength and level, there was a good chance the Nichiren sword would break if he engaged in serious combat. He remembered that Tanjiro's sword had been broken during the fight against the lower five, so he didn't want to use such a fragile sword. It was undeniable that the swordsmiths in Swordsmith Village might have decent skills, but they were ultimately just ordinary people, unlike the advanced blacksmiths in the world of Danmachi. Not only did these advanced blacksmiths possess the blacksmith development ability capable of adding special attributes to forged weapons, but they could also process special materials and forge weapons that could cut through the steel-like bodies of floor bosses. If his Nichiren sword were to be forged by the swordsmiths in Swordsmith Village, the result would only be an excellent sword, unable to even touch the edges of special equipment. For Riesel, who possessed first-class and second-class equipment with the Durandal attribute, it was undoubtedly not a good sword. For this reason, Riesel's thought was simple: he would forge the sword himself. I may not have the blacksmith development ability or no swordsmithing, but I have magic. He had learned structure system magic from Yuri, so while he couldn't make magic items or alchemy items, if it came to making weapons, he could still manage. Of course, what he would make wouldn't be magic weapons, just ordinary weapons. With his current level, accumulated mag, and assistance from the mage development ability, the magic he wielded would undoubtedly surpass that of ordinary structure system magicians in terms of power and effectiveness. If I use decomposition magic to break down large quantities of scarlet crimson iron sand and scarlet ore, removing all impurities and leaving only the essence, the quality of these two materials would reach the standards of special materials. Afterward, using structure system magic to merge the essences of the two materials with Hermit and transform them into a Nichiren sword. This way, the quality of my Nichiren sword should be outstanding, right? By then, I could at least possess a Nichiren sword with the Durandal attribute. With those thoughts in mind, Riesel had already decided. If he was going to use a Nichiren sword, then he wanted the best one. One that surpassed the understanding of everyone in this world, an exclusive Nichiren sword just for him. Chapter 155. Who needs to become a dragon when becoming a sun is more exciting? After chatting for a while, Kyujiro finally left to fulfill Riesel's request. He promised Riesel that he would bring a large amount of scarlet crimson iron sand and scarlet ore. It was not weird for Kyujiro to make such a promise since there remained a considerable quantity of scarlet crimson iron sand and scarlet ore, as no member of the Demon Slayer Corps lacked a Nichiren sword. Even Tanjiro, whose Nichiren sword had been broken once, quickly acquired a new one, demonstrating the availability of materials for the swords. What was likely in short supply were swordsmiths with exceptional skills. However, since Riesel didn't need someone to provide swordsmithing, he just needed the raw materials for the sword, which wasn't difficult. Kyujiro expressed that he would try to bring back as much as possible after obtaining permission from Kagaya, which was quite thoughtful of him. Fortunately, the first Hashira I got to know was Rengoku. Otherwise, if it were someone else, it wouldn't be so easy to talk to. As Riesel thought of the other Hashira in the Demon Slayer Corps, he increasingly felt that each one of them was a problem child. In comparison, even though Kyujiro had a unique personality, he was still very kind-hearted and friendly toward others. As such, handing this matter over to Kyujiro, Riesel felt at ease. Shaking his head, Riesel stopped thinking about Nichiren sword and picked up the 5 books of breathing styles in front of him, starting to read through them one by one. After about an hour of reading, he had a certain understanding of the 5 fundamental breathing styles. Although the 5 fundamental breathing styles are all derived from sun breathing, each of these breathing styles has its own characteristics and advantages. If I only consider their individual characteristics and advantages, they are not inferior to sun breathing. For example, water breathing, characterized by its softness and versatile sword forms, was very dexterous and agile in combat, able to deal with various situations. It was a breathing style as changeable as flowing water. Among all the breathing styles, water breathing was rather easy to practice. Perhaps it didn't have the same power as the other breathing styles, but it had the most advantage in prolonged battles. Even sun breathing couldn't match the versatility and endurance of water breathing. Since the birth of breathing styles, demon slayers proficient in water breathing had always been the most numerous, resulting in never having a vacancy for the water Hashira. Because of this, water breathing was the preferred choice for many when practicing breathing styles. Its characteristics of being easy to practice and easy to master made many demon slayers who didn't consider themselves very talented inclined to practice water breathing. Similar to water breathing was flame breathing. This was a breathing style passed down through generations in the Rengoku family, and it was the breathing style closest to sun breathing, as its power ranked among the top of all breathing styles. Although it wasn't as easy to practice and master as water breathing, flame breathing could be considered the most comprehensive of all breathing styles. With diligent study and effort, Once mastered, the user's strength would increase rapidly and they would quickly rise to prominence. Just like water breathing, there had never been a vacancy for the flame Hashira. As a result, throughout the generations of the Hashira, both flame Hashira and water Hashira have always existed, maintaining the significant presence of these two breathing styles within the Demon Slayer core. According to Riesel's speculation, initially, after sun breathing, the second breathing style to be born was probably flame breathing. Compared to sun breathing, it might not be as powerful, but its destructive power was still very strong. Despite that, the remaining three fundamental breathing styles also had outstanding characteristics. For example, thunder breathing was considered to be the fastest among all breathing styles, with the strongest explosive force, even surpassing sun breathing in terms of speed alone. For this reason, it demanded extremely high physical qualities from its users, second only to sun breathing. It was extremely difficult to practice, as evidenced by the absence of Hashira proficient in thunder breathing, indicating the difficulty of mastering it. Another example was wind breathing, which granted each slash of the user a very powerful cutting power, making it the sharpest breathing style. Not only it could easily slice off any body part of demons, but proficient users could even wrap wind blades around their hands and feet, using this breathing style as taijutsu. Coupled with its speed second only to thunder breathing, the strength of those who practiced this breathing style could be vaguely imagined. Lastly, stone breathing was particularly unique. As the only breathing style among the 5 fundamental breathing styles without derived branches, not only it was both stable and heavy, but it also excelled in defense and offense alike. Users of this breathing style often used heavy weapons, making their defense impregnable and their attacks powerful and forceful. Those who were proficient in it could be considered invincible. Overall, these 5 fundamental breathing styles, in terms of overall ability, fall short of sun breathing. But if one considered only a specific ability, even sun breathing would have to admit defeat to them. As I thought, they're quite interesting. Riesel muttered with relish. When Kaguya claimed that sun breathing was the strongest breathing style, Riesel was somewhat skeptical. After all, it still depended on the person who used it. Among the current Hashira, each one had honed their respective breathing styles to peak proficiency. If going according to Kaguya's logic, didn't that mean anyone who practiced sun breathing could defeat them? Impossible. It could only be said that if they were at the same level, then indeed, the one who practiced sun breathing would be stronger than those who practiced other breathing styles. But in the end, their strength still lay in their own overall ability. Even if both sides were at the same level, the one who practiced sun breathing wouldn't have more endurance than someone who practiced water breathing, nor would they be faster than someone who practiced thunder breathing. Plus, their slashes wouldn't be as sharp as those who practiced wind breathing, and perhaps, their offensive and defensive strength might even pale in comparison to someone who practiced stone breathing. Therefore, while sun breathing was indeed powerful, its strength lay in being versatile. Compared to the specialized capabilities of the 5 fundamental breathing styles, it may not necessarily win. Similarly, breathing styles derived from fundamental breathing styles like love breathing, insect breathing, sound breathing, serpent breathing, and mist breathing specialize even further in certain aspects than their origins. Although they were picky about their users and couldn't be practiced without corresponding talents and special physical qualities, once mastered, they were no less inferior to the 5 fundamental breathing styles, and in some aspects, even stronger. However, breathing styles derived from fundamental breathing styles were really picky about their users, like focusing too much on one aspect, which diminished their value for what Riesel was about to do. In any case, let's give it a try. After memorizing all of the 5 fundamental breathing styles, Riesel picked up a practice wooden sword placed in the room and headed to the courtyard. Mastering the process of 5 fundamental breathing styles wasn't too difficult. Perhaps it was due to Riesel's own terrifying learning ability and growth speed, or perhaps it was because he had already mastered sun breathing. The 5 fundamental breathing styles derived from sun breathing posed little difficulty for him and were easily mastered. As a result, water breathing, first form, water surface slash. In the courtyard, a wave of water suddenly appeared, like a water blade slashing through the air, instantly cutting through the air. With a practice sword in hand, Riesel adjusted his breathing. After slashing a stream of water in front of him, the rhythm of his breath suddenly changed, causing the water vapor around him to turn into flames. Flame breathing. First form, unknowing fire. Riesel dashed forward like a rocket, engulfed in flames. After slashing through the air, he turned back and cut off the water waves that had just risen, evaporating them. In the next moment, Riesel's breathing rhythm changed again, turning the flames around him into a whirlwind. Wind breathing. First form, dust whirlwind cutter. Just a moment ago he was a rocket, now he was a hurricane. Covered in wind, Riesel surged forward, leaving behind a spiral wind blade that cut through the earth. Stone breathing. First form, serpentinite bipolar. As the spiral wind blade disappeared, Riesel's next slash was as heavy as a giant rock, stirring up rebellious dust as it passed through the air. Finally, as his foot touched the ground, he shattered it, transforming into a lightning ray. Thunder breathing. First form, thunderclap and flash. As the sound of thunder ripping through the air echoed, a lightning ray flashed in the courtyard, just as the name implies, becoming a fleeting thunderclap. When the lightning ray disappeared, Riesel's figure appeared amidst the crackling lightning current, assuming an II stance. Gradually, the ever-changing rhythm of his breathing calmed down, allowing him to turn his head and look behind him. There, the surrounding terrain had become a mess, like it had been ravaged by artillery fire, with not a single intact spot. Looks like I'll have to leave some gold for Rengoku to fix his courtyard later. Riesel muttered, a satisfied expression on his face. And just like that, he finally mastered the 5 fundamental breathing styles. Such a sensational and astonishing feat, if word got out, it would surely shock many people to the core. While it took others several years, or even a decade, to master one breathing style, Riesel effortlessly mastered not just 1, but 5 at once. If the Hashira found out about this, their will would likely be utterly crushed. However, for Riesel, the real deal was just beginning. I wonder if it can be as I wish, Riesel murmured, using sun breathing as the foundation, integrating the swordsmanship of this world with the swordsmanship of Akasha continent. Yes, that was what Riesel intended to do in this world. Upon learning that this dimensional travel was to the world of Demon Slayer, Riesel immediately thought of the breathing techniques and swordsmanship of both worlds. If I'm not wrong, this world's swordsmanship is called breathing style, because it uses a unique breathing technique known as total concentration breathing, as its main method to strengthen the heart and lungs by absorbing a large amount of air, accelerating blood flow, temporarily granting strength beyond human limits. On the other hand, the swordsmanship of Akasha continent uses breathing as a support, stimulating and activating magical energy within one's body, making it absorb magical energy to become stronger. In that case, if I incorporate the breathing technique principles and the swordsmanship from both worlds, wouldn't I create a perfect blend that not only boosts my strength during combat but also makes me stronger after each use? Moreover, can I not only make it accelerate my blood flow and strengthen my heart and lungs, but also enhance every organ, even every cell, by infusing them with my massive amount of magical energy, thus unleashing astonishing strength? Such was Riesel's plan, to merge the breathing technique principles and swordsmanship from two worlds, creating a combat style that allowed his strength to explode during combat and become stronger with each battle. Once achieved, it would be a special swordsmanship surpassing even the complete Holy Dragon sword style. After all, who needs to become a dragon when becoming a sun is more exciting? Riesel's eyes sparkled as a smile formed at his mouth. Chapter 156, Relentless Efforts. Riesel's plan wasn't entirely baseless. Initially, total concentration breathing already had the effect of enhancing physical ability, but it only strengthened the heart and lungs, as well as accelerating blood flow, thereby indirectly boosting the body's performance and physical prowess. Akasha continent's breathing technique, on the other hand, was merely a support for swordsmanship by stimulating and activating magical energy within the body, allowing it to grow in all aspects by absorbing the magical energy. If this principle could be integrated into total concentration breathing, it would expand the strengthening range of total concentration breathing to the entire body, which was not an impossible feat. If this feat were to succeed, it would allow the magical energy to merge with the accelerated blood flow, enhancing its intensity and effect, and would undoubtedly provide him with more enhancement and stronger power when using the breathing style. Undoubtedly, this was a process of mutual acceptance, integration, and harmony. As long as the two were cleverly combined, Riesel's plan was not just empty talk. For this reason, Riesel chose sun breathing as the foundation. Sun breathing could produce various breathing styles because it was the origin and foundation of all breathing styles, proving its immense versatility. Using sun breathing as the foundation, merging the breathing principles of two worlds, and the swordsmanship of two worlds, the success rate would greatly increase. On top of that, Riesel also had 5 fundamental breathing styles as a reference. Each of these fundamental breathing styles had its own characteristics, some greatly enhance speed, while others greatly improve flexibility. By drawing inspiration from them, he may be able to expand the strengthening range of breathing style to every part of his body. Coupled with his mastery of breaking steel sword style and incomplete holy dragon sword style, merging all the breathing of the two worlds into sun breathing would elevate the power of sun breathing to an unprecedented degree. It was entirely feasible. Becoming a sun was not just talk, as it was indeed Riesel's goal. Drawing inspiration from the holy dragon sword style, which could hone one's body into that of a dragon, if he could make the new version of sun breathing also have the effect of honing one's body, then his body might undergo unprecedented changes. By then, if practicing holy dragon sword style was to transform a human into a dragon, wouldn't practicing sun breathing be transforming a human into a sun? Of course, all of that was currently just Riesel's wishful thinking and theory. Whether it could be achieved, he didn't know. However, by integrating the breathing of two worlds into the sun breathing, Riesel was still somewhat confident with his theory. Once this plan came to fruition, his gains in this world would be well worth it. Just imagine, after transformation, not only could sun breathing strengthen every cell in his body, but it could even utilize his abundant magical energy, turning it into actual strength to reinforce his body. How powerful would he be then? Certainly not weaker than when using aerial, right? More importantly, total concentration breathing had another advanced state. In that state, even as he drifted into sleep, he could maintain full focus and regulate his breathing, keeping his body in a constant state of strengthening, a state known as total concentration, constant. Swordsmen who could proficiently master total concentration, constant were among the top swordsmen in the Demon Slayer Corps, and mastering it was also the minimum requirement to reach the strength of a Hashira. If Riesel's plan succeeded, then he could completely develop a new form of total concentration, constant for the new sun breathing. In that case, he would be as if constantly using sun breathing and practicing swordsmanship at all times. What did this mean? It meant that Riesel would become stronger each second, even in his dreams, without actively practicing. In this way, even if he couldn't hunt down large numbers of monsters inside the dungeon like in the world of Danmachi and constantly training himself, his status would still skyrocket. Perhaps this wouldn't allow him to gain high-rank Excelia for leveling up, but it could help him reach his current level's upper limit at the fastest speed, that was, SSS rank in all basic abilities. Can I really succeed? Imagining was delightful, and Riesel also believed that his plan had no problems, but whether he could succeed in integrating the breathing principles of the two worlds with his current sun breathing to create a completely new sun breathing, he naturally didn't know. Well, I still have to give it a try. Various principles from the 5 fundamental breathing styles, sun breathing, breaking steel sword style, and holy dragon sword style began to emerge in his mind. Soon, Riesel closed his eyes. Hoo, ha. Gradually, he started to regulate his breathing. To Riesel, the process of fusion was honestly very painful. Riesel had to constantly adjust his breathing, continuously trying various breathing techniques, borrowing from them, blending them, and even changing them, which had a significant impact on his body. Sometimes, the completely disordered breathing made him feel like his lungs were about to explode, his trachea burning as if on fire, exceptionally painful. During this process, there were often symptoms such as ringing in the ears, sore throat, chest tightness, blood vessels popping up all over the body, muscles tearing, and so on. He had to admit that it felt a bit like enduring torture. However, Riesel gritted his teeth and persisted, even disregarding the awful state of his own body. In any case, with the top-class healing magic, Dia Fratel, in hand, as long as his limbs weren't blown off and his heart and brain didn't explode, he could restore himself. Hence, with the belief that, as long as I am not dying, Then I'll keep pushing myself to death. Riesel endured the pain and persisted. He knew that whether sun breathing could successfully evolve according to his own plan had a huge impact on his future and strength. At this point, if Riesel didn't persist, then Riesel wouldn't be Riesel. Isn't this also a kind of challenge? Riesel always liked challenges, otherwise, he wouldn't have pushed himself so hard before, constantly challenging the limits of his human body, or seeking all sorts of thrills and excitement in his previous life. If enduring a bit of torment and pain could lead to success, then for him, it was definitely worth it. And so, Riesel kept trying, kept persisting, combining various understandings and ideas about breathing styles in his mind. Eventually, he smoothly forgot about time, even forgot to eat and sleep, standing in the courtyard day and night. Hoo, ha. In the courtyard, the sound of breathing with various variations, changes in tone, and fluctuations continued. During this time, Kyujiro glanced over here, and the three main characters also came to take a look, but they didn't dare to disturb Riesel, letting him continue his practice. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. In the blink of an eye, several days had passed, and Riesel still maintained his posture in the courtyard, not moving a step from beginning to end. On this day, Tanjiro finally couldn't help but speak up. "Mr. Rengoku, are you really not going to stop Mr. Sugikuni?" Tanjiro stood at the entrance of the courtyard, looking at Riesel's back as he spoke to Kyujiro, who was standing beside him, deeply worried. He hasn't eaten or drunk anything for days. If this continues, his health will deteriorate. It's indeed a serious problem. Kyujiro responded, staring intently at Riesel. However, we can't stop someone from advancing toward a higher domain. Advancing towards a higher domain. But even so, he still needs to eat and rest. Tanjiro retorted. Can't he eat well, rest, and then continue later? Tanjiro himself was a hard-working person. In order to practice water breathing and become a demon slayer of the Demon Slayer Corps, he spent 2 consecutive years practicing in the mountains, his hands worn out countless times, and his body sustaining numerous injuries. He knew the hardships involved all too well. Moreover, after the events with the lower 5, Tanjiro also underwent the practice of total concentration breathing under the insect Hashira, which was equally agonizing. Yet, he persevered through it all. Therefore, Tanjiro understood very well that the more effort one put in, the more rewards one could reap. Yet, even he wouldn't go to the extent of not eating, drinking, or sleeping to the point of neglecting basic needs for days. It was too worrisome and Tanjiro couldn't help but speak up about it. I understand your concerns, young Kamado. I'm worried too, Kyujiro nodded, patting Tanjiro's shoulder. But take a good look at that young man's back. Do you really think you can rush up and stop him? Tanjiro instantly fell silent. Riesel's back looked so desolate, so lonely, yet for some reason, anyone gazing at his figure could sense an unwavering determination, a refusal to compromise. Tanjiro's sense of smell was keen. He could smell how hard and painful Riesel's current situation was just from his body odor, otherwise, why would the scent of sweat and even blood emanate from him? Riesel was definitely undergoing a practice that others couldn't comprehend and was extremely difficult. From his breathing rhythm, you can tell he's attempting something, Kyujiro said with a serious expression. It's a dangerous attempt. Just listening to his breath makes me uneasy. However, he's still persisting. I believe whatever he's attempting now must be important to him. For this reason, Kyujiro couldn't intervene. Have faith in him, young Kamado. Kyujiro suddenly smiled. Young Sugikuni is an incredible young man. I already felt that the first time I met him on the Mugen train. Master must have seen something in him too, which is why he decided to help him without hesitation. Let's just trust him and wait here for his success. Kyujiro's words made Tanjiro turn his gaze toward Riesel. After being silent for a while, Tanjiro slapped his own cheeks, his eyes full of determination. I need to work hard too. Tanjiro quickly turned and left to continue his training. Kyujiro, who watched it all, sighed. They're truly 2 fine youths. A pity they couldn't be taken in as my Suguko. No, maybe not young Sugikuni, but young Kamado might be worth a try. Kyujiro suddenly stroked his chin, remembering something. Meanwhile, Riesel, unaware of all this, continued his relentless efforts without a moment's pause. Chapter 157, 3 months. Riesel's relentless efforts turned out to be longer than he had imagined, and more nerve-wracking than anyone else had anticipated. After persisting in the courtyard for 7 days, he finally collapsed for the first time. It was Kyujiro, who frequently came to check on him, who first noticed Riesel lying in the courtyard and hastily brought him back to the room, calling for a doctor. Of course, the doctor called by Kyujiro was none other than the insect Hashira, Kocho Shinobu. Aside from being a swordsman, Shinobu was also a proficient pharmacist. She also ran a treatment facility within the Demon Slayer Corps known as the Butterfly Mansion, which housed nursing personnel without talent in swordsmanship, specializing in providing treatment and rehabilitation for members injured on missions. In the past, Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke had suffered severe injuries after fighting the lower 5 and were sent to the Butterfly Mansion. With Shinobu's assistance and care, they not only recovered one after another but also mastered total concentration breathing, greatly enhancing their strength. Therefore, when Riesel had an incident, the first person Kyujiro contacted was Shinobu, who managed the Butterfly Mansion. Upon seeing Riesel, Shinobu's face immediately displayed a troubled expression. "I really want to ask, what exactly has he done?" Shinobu spoke in a tone that held no glimmer of hope. "With such a pale complexion and lips almost devoid of color, it's clear he's extremely weakened. Plus, with his muscles and body twitching unconsciously, it's likely he's enduring inhuman pain, possibly even with internal organs rupturing, especially his lungs. I even suspect they might be damaged, otherwise, how could his breathing be like this?" In her own words, this was already a severe condition where even immediate death wouldn't be surprising. Take him to the Butterfly Mansion. With his condition, it's basically impossible for him to recover without lying in bed for 2 to 3 months. With that statement, Shinobu instructed Kyujiro to send Riesel to the Butterfly Mansion immediately. However, just when Kyujiro thought Riesel would indeed need about 2 to 3 months to recover and was considering whether to visit him before going on a mission, he was shocked to find out the next day that Riesel had returned as if nothing had happened. Upon his return, Riesel immediately rushed back to the courtyard and entered that strange breathing state once again. At that moment, Shinobu followed Riesel and chased him all the way to the residence of the Rengoku family. When she saw Riesel enter the courtyard and fall into that strange breathing state, she remained silent for a long time. "Monster." After muttering like that with a peculiar expression, Shinobu left. And so, Riesel continued his arduous practice and efforts. However, different from last time, this time, he persisted for 10 days. 10 days later, he was once again collapsed and sent to the Butterfly Mansion. However, just like the last time, the next day, Riesel returned as if nothing happened again, prompting Shinobu, who was still following him, to say something to Kyujiro. "I can dissect him, can't I? I'm getting interested in his body. Maybe there is an imposter demon among us." Shinobu's serious tone almost left Kyujiro dumbfounded on the spot. Despite all the chaos he caused, Riesel remained indifferent to it all, continuing with his own experiments. With that, time flew by swiftly. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. During this period, Kyujiro had gone on several missions. Even the 3 main characters no longer stay at the residence of the Rengoku family and doing missions from the Demon Slayer Corps instead. Sometimes they went out demon hunting, sometimes they came back to practice, sometimes they separated, and sometimes they set off together. From initially worrying about Riesel, they gradually grew accustomed to his bizarreness and unreasonableness. Even at the Butterfly Mansion, under the direction of Shinobu, a bed was often prepared specially for Riesel. Strangely, this bed only got used for a day at a time, and the next day, the patient lying on it was nowhere, leaving directly. At the same time, what was happening with Riesel was slowly entering the view of the master of the Demon Slayer Corps and every Hashira. Consequently, aside from Kagaya, who found it inconvenient to go out, every Hashira had secretly visited the residence of the Rengoku family over the past 3 months to observe Riesel for a while. Some Hashira just took a glance and then left, like Giyu and Muichiro. However, some Hashira had been observing Riesel all along, such as Sanemi, Obanai, Gyume, Mitsuri, and Tengen. Some observed for a whole day, and some even observed for several days before silently leaving. As for Kyujiro and Shinobu, they had become the Hashira who interacted with Riesel the most. It goes without saying for Kyujiro, as Rizel was in his home and their relationship was the closest. It could be said that Kyujiro was the only one who had watched Rizel persist all the way through from beginning to end. Shinobu, on the other hand, became curious about Rizel because of his occasional collapses and demonstrations of his inhuman recovery, so she started interacting with him and sometimes even personally cared for him. Even Kagaya would often pay attention to Rizel's situation through Shinobu's reports, causing this family head to often show a meaningful expression. And thus, 3 months later, on this day, Rizel's practice finally welcomed a change. Hoo. Ha. It was a rather prolonged inhale, but swiftly completed within a short time. Standing in the courtyard, Rizel remained in that familiar spot, as if he had stood there for several decades like a hermit, facing away from the entrance with his chest gently rising and falling. At this moment, Kyujiro and Shinobu stood at the entrance of the courtyard, observing Rizel's back. Their gazes towards Rizel were akin to those directed at a divine being. "What an extraordinary breath," Shinobu whispered, her voice low. "How does he manage it?" After 3 months, Rizel's breathing had undergone significant changes, no longer chaotic as before, nor disorderly as it initially began. It had become peculiar, almost wondrous, evoking an inexplicable sensation. At least in Shinobu's eyes, Rizel's breathing before her at this moment seemed less like a human and more like a transcendent being, surpassing human comprehension. To the untrained ear, the sound of his breath might seem insignificant, but to the Hashira who had honed their breathing styles to perfection, it resonated like the roar of a great dragon, the exhale of a bright sun, or even the breath of a god. If Zenitsu were here, he would surely hear the thunderous breath hidden within the air, unmistakably not human. Presently, Rizel was engaged in such breathwork, surpassing anything in rhythm and intensity compared to before. I've never seen such breathing before," Kyujiro muttered with his arms folded. "Young Sugikuni, have you created a new breathing style?" Creating a new breathing style wasn't uncommon among the Hashira. Breathing styles like love breathing, serpent breathing, insect breathing, sound breathing, mist breathing, and others were derived from the 5 fundamental breathing styles. Current Hashira like the love Hashira, serpent Hashira, insect Hashira, sound Hashira, and mist Hashira found the existing breathing styles not entirely suitable for them, so they innovated and modified the fundamental breathing styles to create their own derived breathing styles. Throughout history, it wasn't rare for the Hashira to create their own breathing style. Considering this, it seemed quite normal for Rizel, the great swordsman who slew the upper 3, to have the ability to create a new breathing style. However, I don't think his practice is as simple as that. Shinobu sighed and paused for a moment before continuing. Generally, when creating a breathing style, could one be forced to such extent, even several times to the brink of death? Upon hearing her reasoning, Kyujiro remained silent. It's definitely not just a matter of creating a new breathing style, there must be some things we don't understand that have taken shape in that guy. Shinobu stared fixedly at Rizel's back. Kyujiro agreed wholeheartedly, nodding heavily. Young Sugikuni remains an incredible youth. If my Suguko were here and saw the results of his hard work so far, he would surely feel greatly inspired. Surprisingly, the Suguko in his mouth was none other than Tanjiro. Yes, Tanjiro eventually became Kyujiro's Suguko, meaning he had accepted Kyujiro as his mentor. Moreover, thanks to this relationship, Tanjiro now always returned directly to Kyujiro's place after completing missions, as if considering it his own home. Kamado, Shinobu muttered, remembering the kind-hearted boy. She and Tanjiro were also old acquaintances, so upon hearing Kyujiro's words, she smiled knowingly. That's a shame, I was considering whether to take him as my Suguko. After all, he seems to get along quite well with Kanao. Well, that's unfortunate, Kyujiro apologized. Though there was no hint of regret in his face or voice, he exuded an air of openness and honesty. Shinobu could only shake her head and smile wryly. However, just as she was about to say something else, an anomaly suddenly occurred. Boom! Rumble! A rumbling sound erupted in the courtyard. It was the sound of the air distorting. It was the sound of the earth trembling. A terrifying heat surged from the courtyard, as if capable of evaporating everything, causing the surrounding space to distort. What's happening? What? Kyujiro and Shinobu were both shocked, almost reflexively leaping back a considerable distance, lowering their bodies, and assuming a stance ready to draw their swords. It was an instinctive reaction of their bodies. Clearly, to have such a reaction meant that these two had sensed danger. Moreover, it was not just any danger, but a remarkably powerful one. However, in the next moment, they found that the source of the danger was not from any enemy, but from the one they had been observing all along. PSSSTTT. At this moment, Riesel's body standing in the courtyard emitted an extremely fearful heat, making the ground beneath his feet sizzle and emit the smell of scorching as if it were being roasted by fire. Chapter 158. Pioneer of the Sun. Whoosh. Asterisk. As the massive heat spread throughout the courtyard, a tree suddenly ignited, bursting into flames. At the same time, the surrounding space began to distort, and before long, the flowers, grass, and trees in the courtyard also caught fire. Everything around, including the ground, seemed to melt in the face of this astonishing heat and high temperature, gradually losing its original form and dissolving like butter. "Yo young Sugikuni." Unable to hold back, Kyujiro called out to Riesel in panic. At this moment, the temperature around had become unbearably high, causing even Kyujiro, the flame Hashira, to break into a sweat. Not to mention Shinobu, whose forehead was nearly soaked, with her hair sticking to her forehead, and her clothes drenched in sweat, outlining unexpectedly appealing curves on this insect Hashira's body. After Kyujiro's voice echoed, the heat pouring out in the courtyard suddenly halted. Soon, the heat began to dissipate, the high temperature fading away, and the anomalies around Riesel's body disappeared. Only the burning trees and the charred marks on the ground remained, proving that everything that had just happened was not an illusion but reality. Huff. Standing in the courtyard, Riesel seemed to exhale a breath of relief, opening his eyes. In his eyes, there was a fleeting bright glow, as hot as fire and as bright as light. "Are you guys okay?" Riesel asked with a calm expression as he approached the two Hashira. Both Hashira shook their heads, still sweating profusely, but seemingly not injured. However, when they looked at the unusual brilliance in Riesel's eyes, they were filled with indescribable surprise. "That heat just now was so scary," Kyujiro exclaimed in surprise before asking, "Young Sugikuni, did you succeed?" Upon hearing that, a smile finally appeared on Riesel's calm face. Seeing his smile, the two Hashira understood. "It seems so. Well, congrats. That's really something to celebrate, right?" Shinobu said with a beautiful smile, congratulating Riesel. Thank you." Riesel nodded, his tone tinged with a hint of sigh. Indeed, it was something to celebrate. After 3 months of relentless efforts, nearly 100 days of life-threatening trials, and enduring endless pain and torment, he had finally succeeded. His previous assumption and theory had been completely confirmed. "Hoo ha." Riesel breathed lightly, drawing in a large amount of air from the surroundings, allowing it to enter his lungs and then spread throughout his body. In just this second, a monumental change occurred within his body. Every cell in his body became active. His internal organs, one after another, seemed to be activated, emitting heat. His blood flowed rapidly, mixing with the magical energy emanating from deep within his body, surging throughout his entire existence. At this moment, Riesel could clearly feel that the power of his body had undergone a remarkable enhancement, to the point where he even felt like he was using aerial. Obviously, this was because of the new and evolved sun breathing, a breathing style that combined the breathing principles and swordsmanship of this world and the Akasha continent. It perfectly fulfilled Riesel's theory, not only extending the strengthening effects of total concentration breathing to every part and every cell of his body but also incorporating the vast magical energy within his body into the blood flow to enhance the effects of honing his body. It also possessed the breathing style effect of Akasha continent's swordsmanship. Each time it was used in each training session, it would allow his body to continuously absorb the stimulated magical energy from his gate, permanently enhancing his body's strength. It could amplify strength in battle and assist in growth on regular days, fulfilling Riesel's initial plan completely. Now, once I use sun breathing, the increase in my strength should not be lower than when I used aerial before, right? After merging the breathing and swordsmanship of two worlds, my evolved sun breathing can be called a special swordsmanship in the Akasha continent, and it's highly likely to be no weaker than the Holy Dragon sword style. My current strength. Riesel pondered for a moment, forming some thoughts in his mind. I can definitely challenge opponents of higher level. Now was different. Before, Riesel needed to use aerial, an overpowered enchant-type magic, to gain the capability to challenge higher-level opponents by enduring a tremendous physical burden as a side effect. Otherwise, he had to reach the limit of his current level by reaching SSS in all basic abilities, so that he could rely on his astonishing latent basic abilities accumulated over several levels and the assistance of several combat-type development abilities to challenge higher-level opponents. However, none of those were necessary anymore now. Since the enhancement brought by the evolved sun breathing was all-encompassing, it required no burden on his body nor reaching the limit of his current level. Now, his sun breathing could allow him to have stable strength to fight against a level above, without any side effects. Just this alone, the importance of sun breathing to Riesel had already surpassed that of aerial. Of course, the gains brought by the evolved sun breathing to him were far more than this. In addition to the effects brought by this new and evolved breathing style, the process of learning it also brought about two changes to his body. The first change came from his status. In Riesel's mind, a status appeared on its own. Riesel Brynhart, Level 5, STR, D570 right pointing arrow SSS 1303. End. D555 right pointing arrow SSS 1300. Dex. C611 right pointing arrow SSS 1385. AGI. C637 right pointing arrow SSS 1393. Mag. C632 right pointing arrow SSS 1399. Lightweight. F. Swordsman. F. Mage. G. Battle Adept. I. This was Riesel's recently updated status. After 3 months of relentless efforts, he finally reached the limit of his current level, achieving SSS in all basic abilities. Although at first glance, he seemed to have only been continuously attempting to develop a new breathing style during these 3 months without any decent training. In fact, his basic abilities grew because of one of his skills. In the effects of Fool's Obsession, it was clearly written. The deeper the obsession, the stronger the effect. The effect is greatly enhanced in dangerous situations. Undoubtedly, during these 3 months, what Riesel had done perfectly triggered these two effects. Persisting through extreme pain and relentlessly evolving sun breathing regardless of danger, this behavior completely qualified as obsession and dangerous situations. As a result, Riesel's growth rapidly escalated, successfully reaching the limit of his current level and achieving SSS in all basic abilities. However, this was not the change Riesel thought about. The growth of basic abilities was an expected occurrence, but not a noteworthy change. The actual change in his status was in the section where his skills lay. There, besides Fool's Obsession, Endless, and Self-Redemption, emerged a new skill. Pioneer of the Sun. Become a spiritual being. Double magic effects from the light and heat systems. Gain resistance to the light, heat, frost, and darkness systems. Possess special attack capability against evil entities. Riesel awakened a new skill called the Pioneer of the Sun. The emergence of this brand new skill meant that his previous wishful thinking of turning himself into a sun was no longer just a pipe dream. Although he hadn't literally transformed himself into a sun, he seemed to have turned himself into a spiritual being, akin to a spirit born from nature and considered a part of nature itself. Although he still looked like a human, due to the effect of Pioneer of the Sun, his body seemed to have transformed into some sort of spiritual being, possessing characteristics similar to a spirit. Moreover, he was a spirit born from the sun. What changes this spiritual body would bring, Riesel wasn't yet clear. He could only wait to explore them slowly in the future. Nevertheless, judging from the other effects of Pioneer of the Sun, this skill was definitely unique. It doubled the effect of magic from the light and heat systems, meaning that light attribute and fire attribute magic would both have double power in his hands. Without a doubt, this would enhance magic like Fusillade Phalerica and Ray Levadine, 2 flame attribute wide area annihilation magic, to a great degree. In the future, Riesel wouldn't fear high temperatures or low temperatures anymore, nor would he dread fire magic or ice magic. No matter what kind of magic was cast upon him, as long as it was from the light, heat, frost, and darkness systems, the damage it could inflict would be significantly weakened. Furthermore, the special attack capability against evil entities was particularly valuable. This meant that if he faced enemies with evil attributes in the future, he would have a restraining effect on them. For example, he might be able to slay demons in this world even without using a Nichiren sword. Moreover, many monsters who inhabited the dungeon in the world of Danmachi were also considered evil. Even demon swordsmen who wielded evil swordsmanship, once confronted by him in the war festival, might find themselves severely restrained. All of these effects were significant enough to fill Riesel with satisfaction. As for the second kind of change, it came from his senses. Riesel raised his gaze and looked at Kyujiro and Shinobu in front of him. Under his gaze, their bodies gradually became transparent enough for him to see the insides of their bodies. He could see their hearts and internal organs. He could see their muscles and flesh. He could even see the blood vessel flow in Kyujiro and Shinobu's lungs, and based on these signs of flow and the degree of muscle contraction, he could even predict what actions these two would take next. So, this is the transparent world. Experiencing this incredible ability with his own eyes, Riesel silently thought to himself, amazed. Chapter 159, Transparent World and Selfless State. Transparent world. It was a world, or rather a state, that could only be seen after striving with all one's might, enduring pain, and making one's mind transparent. People who entered this state could concentrate and shut down unnecessary senses, making their bodies appear transparent and allowing them to see through the condition of the other's body. They could observe the flow of blood vessels in others' lungs, the contraction of muscles, and the activity level of organs, thus predicting and sensing others' actions, significantly enhancing their own speed of movement, prediction of attacks, and ability to evade. In simple terms, it was an ultimate sublimation of perception, control, and extension. Generally, those who mastered the transparent world could not only hide their fighting spirit according to their own needs but also accelerated their perception, making their enemies' movements appear slow, and their enemies' actions almost had no secrets in their eyes. This was what the upper three, Akaza, referred to as the highest domain, known as the selfless state, or the domain of supremacy, the final domain that masters of swordsmanship and martial arts could only see after honing their abilities to the limit. Riesel, in his 3 months of relentless efforts, had not only awakened the transparent world but had also unknowingly arrived in the highest domain known as the selfless state. As a result, once Riesel concentrated and shut down unnecessary senses, focusing all perception of the outside world on what was right in front of him, he could easily make his mind clear, see through the body of people in front of him, and effortlessly observe the signs of life in them. He knew that the transparent world was quite useful for him. After all, his perception ability was not that outstanding. At most, he became more sensitive to the flow of wind and atmosphere when using aerial, or sensing the flow of magical energy. Now that he had awakened the transparent world, his perception would be greatly useful in battle, making fighting easier and more efficient. Truthfully, this was also a pleasant surprise even for Riesel, which put him in a good mood. Meanwhile, Kyujiro and Shinobu, who had no idea that they had been completely seen through by Riesel, were curious about his current strength. How strong has Sugikuni become now? Shinobu thought half-jokingly. Has he become unbeatable in this world? Young Sugikuni, who can easily kill the upper three, has now become even stronger. Kyujiro wondered inside his mind. Does Master expect something from this? At this moment, both of them recalled Kagaya's words before. I can already sense it. In our generation, demon slayers and demons may finally settle the score, putting an end to this millennia-old history of mistakes. Remembering the rare excitement in Kagaya's words and face, Kyujiro and Shinobu glanced at each other. Now, perhaps they also understood and shared the same feeling as Kagaya. After all, they had witnessed firsthand the astonishing phenomena that occurred just now after Riesel succeeded in his practice. With Riesel's current strength, if there was indeed an opportunity, it was indeed possible to put an end to the millennia-long history of mistakes and finally settle the score between demons and demon slayers. As they thought like that, the looks on Kyujiro and Shinobu's faces changed as they looked at Riesel. Thanks for your help during this time. Riesel expressed his gratitude to the two. If it weren't for you two, I might not have been able to succeed so easily. Nah, It's not much to do with us, young Sugikuni. Kyujiro completely declined any credit. We didn't really help much. Everything was accomplished through your own efforts. Yep, Shinobu nodded, but then her tone became somewhat resentful. Sugikuni doesn't need anyone to take care of him at my place either. Every time you collapse in terrible condition, you wake up looking completely fine the next day. Besides providing a bed, it's like I haven't done anything at all, you know. Kyujiro nodded in agreement, playing along. After all Kyujiro did was put Rizel on the bed when he collapsed and send him to the butterfly mansion to recover. He didn't do anything else, at most providing a place for Rizel to practice. Moreover, that kind of help was hardly worth mentioning in his eyes. Of course, Rizel definitely didn't think that way. You both took care of me, that's a fact, no need to be modest. Rizel shook his head. Anyway, I owe you both a favor. If there's anything you need my help with in the future, feel free to ask. Upon hearing Rizel's words, Shinobu was somewhat intrigued. Then can I study your body? Finally, she revealed her ambitious side. Nope, Rizel didn't even hesitate, rejecting outright. Shinobu pursed her lips, looking disappointed. Please make normal requests, thank you. Rizel sighed. Okay, duly noted, Shinobu replied with an unconvincing smile. So, young Sugikuni, do you still need to continue practicing? Kyujiro asked with raised eyebrows. I don't think so. Rizel pondered for a while before continuing. I've already achieved the breathing style I envisioned, so there's no need to continue. If there's anything else to do, it would be to try mastering total concentration, constant. Total concentration, constant. Kyujiro nodded. With your abilities, you'll master it quickly. Rizel didn't refute his statement. Truly, total concentration, constant, wasn't particularly difficult for him. Rizel's learning ability and growth speed were beyond human, to say the least. Moreover, as an adventurer, he had experience venturing into the dungeon which was useful for learning total concentration, constant. When embarking on dungeon expeditions, it often took a dozen days or more. During this period, adventurers spent their time resting and sleeping in the dungeon. Any adventurer knew that sleeping in the dungeon filled with monsters was in itself quite dangerous. It required not only calming one's mind and maintaining a strong mentality to sleep soundly but also staying vigilant at all times, as even amid slumber, one couldn't afford to let their guard down completely. Even with party members keeping watch, adventurers needed to maintain a minimal level of vigilance toward the surroundings to avoid dangers catching them off guard. Hence, all high-class adventurers had a mandatory skill, quickly falling asleep while remaining alert to the surroundings even in their dreams. Finn had guided Rizel in this aspect during his first dungeon expedition. For this reason, Rizel had to stay fully focused at all times, maintaining concentration even in his dreams, uninterrupted for 24 hours. For him, mastering total concentration, constant, was just a matter of adapting for a while before succeeding. Eventually, he would grasp it, always in a state of heightened breathing and constantly honing his body even in his sleep. In this way, Rizel's initial idea of continuous growth over 24 hours, capable of tapping into his potential and enhancing his status even without practice, would come to fruition. Oh, by the way, young Sugikuni. Kyujiro suddenly remembered something. The thing you asked me to handle before, I've already taken care of it. Upon hearing that, Rizel was first puzzled but then quickly realized. Are you talking about the scarlet crimson iron sand and scarlet ore? His question was met with an affirmative response. Kyujiro grinned. Do you want to go take a look? Sure. Rizel nodded without hesitation. In that case, I'll head back first. Shinobu smiled as she turned away. I'll report to Master about Sugikuni completing his practice. He should be pleased. Gotcha. Kyujiro nodded. I'll leave it to you, Kocho. With that, Shinobu left with a smile. Let's go, young Sugikuni. Kyujiro turned and quickly led Rizel into his residence's warehouse. As for the courtyard, someone quickly came to put out the fire and clean up the mess. How? Is this enough? In a warehouse belonging to the Rengoku family, Kyujiro confirmed with Rizel at his side. Rizel didn't answer immediately, instead gazing at the scene before him, pondering. Inside the sizable warehouse, piles of ore, shining like jade and steel, formed small mountains. "Are these scarlet crimson iron sands and scarlet ores?" Riesel muttered to himself. Kyujiro exclaimed. "These are ores that can only be collected from the highest mountains closest to the sun. Bathed in sunlight year-round, they absorb ample sunlight energy, making them the primary materials for forging Nichiren swords." Even without his explanation, Riesel could vaguely sense that these ores indeed emitted a gentle energy akin to sunlight. Although this energy didn't enhance the quality or structure of the ores, it had a special effect only on demons that were weak to sunlight. When used in swordsmithing, swords produced from these ores were not fundamentally different from ordinary swords, except for their added effectiveness against demons. Outside of the world of Demon Slayer or away from demons as enemies, swords forged from these ores would be entirely ordinary swords. Not only they couldn't slice through iron like butter, but even cutting through a rock would likely require the skill of a highly proficient swordsman. However, with so many ores in his possession, they would still serve a somewhat great purpose. "In that case, I'll take them. Thanks, Rengoku." Riesel thanked once more. Shortly afterward, Kyujiro departed, leaving Riesel alone to survey the warehouse filled with scarlet crimson iron sands and scarlet ores. "All right then, let's get started." A surge of magical energy quickly rippled through his body. Chapter 160, New Hermit. Buzz. As crimson waves surged from Riesel's body like a tide, the space in the dim warehouse began to tremble faintly. Under the cover of the crimson waves, the piles of scarlet crimson iron sand and scarlet ore took on the same crimson hue. Decompose. Riesel initiated decomposition magic. Instantly, scarlet crimson iron sands and scarlet ores covered by the crimson waves began to disintegrate. Their surfaces peeled off, their shells gradually turned to powder and fell apart, and oily black substances filtered out, dripping onto the ground and seeping into the floor. Using decomposition magic, Riesel removed impurities from scarlet crimson iron sands and scarlet ores, leaving only the most essential parts, causing all the ores in the warehouse to gradually shrink within the crimson waves. Originally, the sizes of scarlet crimson iron sands and scarlet ores present were similar, ranging from about the size of a soccer ball to slightly larger. However, under the effects of decomposition magic, their internal structures unraveled, impurities were continuously removed, and they ended up reduced to small pieces about the size of ping-pong balls. Yet, despite their small size, not only did their surface colors change drastically, becoming as clear and transparent as jewels, but the sunlight energy they emitted was also purer and richer than before. Clearly, this was because Riesel hadn't decomposed the sunlight energy absorbed by the ores but left it within, resulting in its concentration alongside the essence of the ores. Before long, only crystalline gemstone-like essences remained in the warehouse, emitting sunlight-like radiance and illuminating the entire room. Only then did Riesel cease using decomposition magic and begin using structure system magic. Without delay, he fused all the gemstones into one, refining them into a single gemstone. The process went smoothly, with all the gemstones gathering before Riesel under the influence of his magic, intertwining, converging, and merging with each other, reminiscent of the scene when his dimensional magic cube was in operation. Soon, a gemstone, about the size of 2 palms, appeared in front of Riesel. It resembled a massive diamond, with sharp edges on the surface and a transparent interior, highly ornamental. It was like a miniature sun, emitting rich energy and warmth, making one unconsciously want to cradle it in their palm. Riesel extended his finger and touched it, finding that the temperature on the surface was higher than he had imagined. If ordinary people were to touch this, wouldn't their finger be burnt by now? Since the present Riesel was unafraid of low or high temperatures, even if he fell into magma, his body might be fine. For this reason, it was not strange for him to regard the temperature on the surface of the gemstone as insignificant. Such a gemstone can truly be considered a special kind of magic metal, right? Riesel nodded as he observed the gemstone. Under the effects of decomposition magic and structure system magic, the gemstone formed by the fusion of gemstone-like essences was of quality and value no less than many refined metals in the world of Danmachi or many magic metals in the Akasha continent. It remained to be seen what kind of sword could be forged using such a gemstone. There probably wasn't any blacksmith in this world capable of processing this gemstone. Riesel stroked his chin and began pondering. In the world of Danmachi, perhaps advanced blacksmiths with the blacksmith development ability might have a way, but the blacksmiths in this world definitely couldn't process such ore. Since Riesel was in the same situation, he chose to take a different path. Swish! With a flick of his hand, Riesel materialized a bright silver short sword. It was none other than Hermit. Under normal circumstances, Riesel always used this second-class equipment with the Durandal attribute as his secondary weapon. Only when faced with powerful enemies would he resort to using his main weapon, Fool. However, it was ultimately just second-class equipment, with slightly lower power and performance than ordinary second-class equipment. If it weren't for the Durandal attribute, Hermit's performance wouldn't meet his current needs. Now, Riesel was not only a level 5 first-class adventurer but also at the limit of level 5, so his strength couldn't be regarded as ordinary level 5 anymore. Just do the math. Other adventurers, even the most talented ones, could only reach an astonishing proficiency of S999 in all basic abilities with each level up. This meant that by the time they reached the limit of level 5, their total proficiency from all basic abilities was less than 5,000. What about Riesel? With each level up, he could surpass the limit, reaching a full SSS in all basic abilities, with proficiency in each basic ability reaching at least 1200 or more. This meant that when he reached the limit of level 5, his total proficiency from all basic abilities was at least 6,000. Moreover, Riesel consistently acquired combat-type development abilities with each level up, enhancing his status in battle and amplifying his magic attack power. As a result, his status had already surpassed that of the most talented prodigies at the same level. However, the question was, could these prodigies reach a full S999 proficiency in all basic abilities with each level up? Impossible. According to Riesel's understanding of the original work, even level 7 Autar, known as Orario's ultimate weapon, only had 4 of his basic abilities reaching S rank, and not all 4 of them could reach 999 in proficiency either. Even Ice, the prodigy who held the record for the fastest level up before Riesel appeared, only had about 1 or so basic abilities reaching S rank with each level up. In summary, even though Riesel was still level 5, he could compete with low-middle level 6 adventurers under normal circumstances, even without using magic or breathing styles, he had a way to defeat them. However, now, Riesel possessed the capability to consistently surpass 1 level in combat power. What does consistently surpass 1 level mean? It meant that regardless of the level, Riesel could have the combat power to ignore 1 level above him. If Riesel's combat power was at low-middle level 6, then he could challenge someone at low-middle level 7. Yes, after 3 months of relentless effort, his strength and combat power were now almost equal to low-middle level 7. Of course, this was under the assumption that he didn't use magic. Once he used magic, his strength would increase even further. For someone like Riesel, a special equipment slightly inferior in power to regular second-class equipment, its performance naturally couldn't keep up with him anymore. If it weren't for Hermit having the Durandal attribute, it might have been discarded by him by now. Because of this, Riesel had the idea of rebuilding Hermit and intended to turn it into his own Nichiren sword. Sun breathing is a breathing style that emphasizes comprehensive enhancement and power of the swordsmanship. Fool belongs to a lighter, more agile weapon, focusing on attack speed rather than power. Using it with sun breathing, although not impossible, ultimately doesn't match well. On the other hand, weapons like Nichiren sword are most suitable for this world's swordsmanship, such as sun breathing. With such thoughts, Riesel no longer hesitated. First, use decomposition magic to slightly disassemble the structure inside Hermit. Then, without destroying its Durandal attribute, integrate the gemstone into it. In the next moment, Riesel activated decomposition magic again, this time covering Hermit with a crimson vortex. Right now, he controlled it very carefully, fearing that if he exerted too much power, he would destroy the Durandal attribute. Since it was the most useful weapon attribute for him, if it were destroyed, he would be better off continuing to use the original Hermit. Consequently, he controlled his magic very carefully and meticulously, letting Hermit gradually dissolve in the crimson vortex, turning into a pool of molten steel. At this point, Riesel threw the gemstone he was holding, letting the crimson vortex cover the silver steel and the crystal clear gemstone. Before long, the two merged quickly and soon became a pool of molten iron. Surprisingly, this pool of iron was crimson, emitting a super high temperature. Once it dripped on the ground, it would definitely burn a big hole in it instantly. Refine. Riesel made a prompt decision. He stopped using decomposition magic and switched to structure system magic to shape the pool of molten iron into a sword. As for the style of the sword, he had already thought about it. In his previous life, Riesel had a very favorite sword, known as Thousand Demon Daggers. This was a powerful weapon in Scissor 7, known for its offensive nature and uniqueness. Its blade comprised numerous fragments with a black handle and a single-edged blade. It had blue stripes depicting evil spirit patterns near the sword guard, emitting blue or purple light. Riesel planned to create his own Nichiren sword according to the style of this sword. And so, while recalling the appearance of Thousand Demon Daggers, he used his magic to construct, allowing the scorching hot molten iron to begin to take shape. Under the brilliance of his magic, the molten iron gradually elongated into the shape of a sword. After 10 minutes had passed, a sword identical to what Riesel had imagined emerged. It had a black handle and a single-edged blade, and the blade indeed looked like it was made up of countless fragments, covered in crack-like textures. However, unlike Thousand Demon Daggers, the texture near the guard of the sword was not an evil spirit pattern but a divine spirit pattern, emitting a fiery red light like flames. Seeing the sword take shape, Riesel had another idea and added a word to the top of its handle that read, Hermit. Yes, Riesel still intended to name it Hermit, still Hermit, yet no longer Hermit. Soon, as the brilliance of magic dissipated, Riesel's exclusive Nichiren sword was also completed. As Riesel gripped the new Hermit, a sense of heaviness and heat immediately transmitted to him through his palm.